the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can I get a roll call?
Councilmember Cook,
Here.
Councilmember Hundley,
Here.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Here, you have my microphone.
I need two tonight.
Mayor Harrington.
Present.
Thank you.
And we don't have any closed session to report on. Does anyone have any changes to the agenda, or is there a motion to approve it? Motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you.
And now on to public comment. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Under state law, unless otherwise permitted under the Ralph M. Brown Act, the merits of the matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the City Council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for council consideration. Upon being acknowledged, please step to the podium and speak into the microphone and state your name and the spelling of your name and your address. Hi, Ken.
Thank you, Mayor. Ken Brown, BROWN, 1396 Lubeck Street in the beautiful town of Sonoma. The Sonoma Patient Group is having another cannabis seminar for seniors and their caregivers May 8th. That's a Wednesday from noon to 2 p.m. at the Sonoma Valley Library, a great facility. Featured presenter is Dr. Marilyn Holter, a Harvard-trained, board-certified anesthesiologist with 40 years of practice. She is in her 8th year of a medicinal cannabis consulting and has seen over 15,000 patients. Sonoma Patient Group is online, and you can order your cannabis online for in-store pickup or delivery. You each have a flyer at your place, and this is a very benevolent way to receive your cannabis, and it's a very positive thing, and I thank the council for helping us get our business license. That's it.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Harrington, council members, staff, and members of the public. My name is Terry Shore. I'm the Regional Director for the North Bay for Greenbelt Alliance. I'm at 515 Hopkins Street in Sonoma. And I just wanted to make a couple of quick housing-related comments. First, I wanted to thank the council and staff for organizing the upcoming panels on housing that I think will be very helpful and informative to the community. I look forward to hearing who the actual speakers will be. I don't think that was posted yet. It seems to be an era of housing panels. Over in Petaluma, Urban Chat is also hosting a number of housing panel discussions, and I believe that Sustainable Sonoma Valley is also working on one for May the 8th. So it's exciting to see all that happening. One of the updates that you might be interested in that maybe you've already heard about, I'm not sure, but the City of Sonoma recently filed its report on housing to the state of California to provide an update on the progress to meet your regional housing allocation needs. And through 2023, the city has been allocated 137 units. And according to the updated report from the planning director, you have built 46 to date. So we're definitely making progress, but 91 are still needed. However, when I read through the report, and I encourage you all to do the same, it appears that there are 125 units entitled and 73 applications. So I don't know if those are in addition to or part of the other numbers. So that's really good news. And the last note I wanted to bring up was the urban growth boundary and the general plan update. That is being considered at a later agenda item, but I hope it's okay if I make a comment now, because I probably won't be here at the end of the meeting. which is I urge you to agendize that, particularly the urban growth boundary. It looks to me like the general plan and the urban growth boundary will need to be on parallel tracks so that you can meet the December 2020 deadline to renew it. And Greenbelt Alliance is looking forward to working with the city and helping you to do that in whatever way that we can. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, council and staff. Fred Allebach, 19550 8th Street East. That's ALLEBACH, no N and no K. I wanted to come down and just let the council know that I really support the council, and I really don't like the anonymous attacks that are being made on people on the council and from the campaign season, the anonymous attacks. And I think that it's just a really poor demonstration of desire to participate in the public policy. So it looks like, there's people who've got sour grapes who want to make anonymous attacks. And locally, we can see who people are who might have sour grapes. So if they don't want to announce themselves, it's kind of clear who they might be. But anyway, I just wanted to say that I don't think there's really a place for that. And if people aren't willing to step forward and be counted, then they should just basically be ignored, and their communications shouldn't be accepted or given any credence. If you can't say who you are, that's no good. So I just want to let you know I support you guys, and there you go.
Thank you very much, Fred. Anybody else? Seeing no one rise to the podium, I will close public comment. And I also want to let folks know that Councilmember Agrimonti is sick tonight, and unfortunately she cannot join us. But she wishes she could be here. Does anyone have a meeting dedication?
Rob's here. We're doing the whole thing.
I wanted to dedicate our meeting to Paris. The news of Notre Dame I found very hard to wrap my brain around, and I can only imagine what it would feel like to be in Sonoma and lose something that's so associated with our identity. So it's hard to figure out what I think about it.
All right. I agree. Next, on to something very Sonoma, our Celebrate Sonoma program, and we have a presentation by Vice Mayor Harvey.
Hello? All right, awesome. So yeah, you can come up, and you guys can come up if you'd like to. We have Amy Harrington, our mayor, started the Celebrate Sonoma kind of day where we recognize somebody who is important and integral to the town, and that represents the best of what Sonoma is, and just kind of recognize people who are not often recognized. And so for me, you were the first person that I thought of. When I first started running for council, I went and chatted with Rob, and he said to me, the most important thing for him was young people and caring about the youth. And as somebody that grows up in Sonoma, that was something that's really important to me. And so Rob's always been somebody who's really represented that. When we had the skate park in town, it was built. There was a time when it was about ready to be closed because there was nobody to maintain it, and there were problems there. And Rob took it upon himself to say, I'm going to be the person. I will take that on. I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to get people to get out there and take care of it, and that he was going to do that. And I thought that was incredible. Rob's run the Sonoma Old School Skate Shop, which I've patronized many times, which is really one of the only businesses in town that's really, in my opinion, one of the few that's really youth focused and focused on the new trends and things like that are going on. Always employed new people that were young, and just always stood up for the youth on the Boys and Girls Club board for a long time. And so I just really wanted to recognize Rob for everything that he's done for this community, and especially focusing in on young people. And I just really appreciate it. So we have this certificate for you. And from henceforth, Amy Harrington, or everybody on council, will recognize today, April 15th. Unfortunately, it's tax day. But thank you so much for everything that you've done. And if you'd like to say anything, please feel free. So, absolutely.
Okay. I don't really probably have a whole lot to say other than it's really easy to want to care about the youth. I mean, it started by caring about my own 3 children, truthfully, but also understanding that in any small town when there's not a lot of things to do, kids are going to find less than desirable things to occupy their time. And so if you give them some stuff to do or try to find activities that'll keep them out of trouble, then at least a bunch of them will focus in that direction. So that was a piece of the mission of opening the skate shop, taking over the skate park when they were threatening to close it. And even though I'm no longer the official owner of the shop, even though I'm still involved backside, but I've been working 7 years on getting a pump track added to Maxwell Park, which is kind of like a BMX track, but not really. So it's for all ages, and Google pump track, and that way you can, instead of me explaining. But basically, it's written into the plan for 2019. It will be happening, and it's just another piece of something to give kids to do, as opposed to hanging on a street corner with nothing to do. So I just lived here 35 years, love my city, and it's easy to be contributing to a place you love. And thank you.
Wonderful. I think we can have a few city council comments, and then we'd like to take a photo if possible. And I would just start the comments. So I think maybe, I don't know, 3 years ago, my daughter saved up all her birthday money and allowance money, and we went down there and we made her skateboard, and we picked the sandpaper, whatever it's called. She put it on there and the wheels and stuff. And then we, myself included, rode that skateboard around town a long time till it got stolen, but it was a lot of fun. And I remember the sign saying if kids could come in and show their report card and prove that they had gotten straight A's, and they would get a discount and all those wonderful things. And I agree. And it's one of my main missions is to make sure that we have stuff for youth to do that's engaging and meets them where they're at. And it's so wonderful that you're committed to doing that as well. So for my personal experience and for all the kids of Sonoma, thank you so much.
Thank
you. Congratulations, Rob. Your reputation has always far exceeded you and your work that you've done for your youth. And I have heard about it from all corners of the city for years, about the appreciation for people of what you have done for our youth. And I think that especially in a smaller community, we don't always have the market to support the kind of retail establishments that youth might like, and we don't have the government resources to have the government programs. So it's really important to have something. And I think that you have been a staple in raising up the interests of the youth, and I think that a lot of people have followed suit after you. So I appreciate all that you have done and the legacy that you have left, and I'm thankful that we are appreciating you tonight.
I just want to say congratulations. We've had a lot of talks about politics. As you know, I tried to get you to run for council many times. Seeing you here, I wish you were up here with us, because I knew that you would have done a great job. And thank you for everything you've done for the community. And I know.
There's still time.
I will see you at the post office tomorrow.
And with that, can we take a photo?
Yeah. You guys want to talk?
Yeah, good photo.
Let's go this way.
We've got this. And everybody who's here for this item, if you want to come up also. I'm next to you.
Oh, yes, please come on up. Come on up. Okay, squeeze a little tighter so we can get you. Okay. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Nice. Perfect. Thank
Thanks
you.
again. Thank you. Very kind words. Thank you. Are you close?
We did good.
Okay, you did.
Okay, that was really nice. And now on to item 3.2, which is a presentation of the annual report by Vintage House and the Boys and Girls Club of Sonoma Valley. And I will turn it to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Harrington, members of the council. So as council's aware, we restructured our recreation program about 2 years ago, and we are fortunate to have 4 key nonprofits that basically provide the city's recreation services. We had presentation a couple weeks ago from Sonoma Community Center and the Sonoma Ecology Center, and we now tonight have the executive directors from Vintage House and Boys and Girls Club. So I'd like to start out with Boys and Girls Club, and so if Carrie would come forward, and she has a PowerPoint to walk through with you.
I do. Good evening, Mayor
Welcome.
Harrington, members of the council. There we go. Oh, show me. Yeah. I'm not the most tech savvy. Our program director is way better. Oh, that might help. So I don't want to take too much of the time. I know your agenda is really full, and I want to thank you all because I think most of you were just at our gala and probably heard quite a bit about our organization, and I know a lot here know what we do day to day. But I did want to just take the opportunity to, we had put together a kind of a year in the life of a member. And I just kind of wanted to share with you what it looked like month to month that the city dollars are contributing to. Our fiscal year actually ends June 30th, so we'll have some different budget numbers to share at that time. But I think what's really important is just kind of that narrative of what exactly we're doing as far as our sports, our recreation, and what that looks like. So if you take a look at the slide up here, August, and I have to look here, can you guys hear me? Closely, kicks off basically our year for a member. That's when our school year starts up. For $175, youth can come, of course, to Boys and Girls Club every day after school for spring break. That is the cost to them for the year. So pretty impressive, all that they're able to do. Triple Play is our mind, body, and soul program that really focuses on the overall well-being and health and fitness of our youth there at the Boys and Girls Club. So it's a piece of our recreation component that I think is important. There are several others on here that I would take up your entire meeting tonight going through, so I won't do that to you. But just to point out these different pieces. Did I hit it right? Did I turn it off, Kathy? September starts Girls on the Run. We currently partner with Flowery, Maxwell, Dunbar, and Sasserini, and we offer that for 3rd through 8th graders. So we also offer that at Altamira as well. October is our fine arts ramp up, which is pretty exciting because as part of our 4 nonprofits that are in line with this funding, we were able to partner with Vintage House to have our fine arts exhibit through the month of January. It's still there, right? So we spend this time with our youth really exploring their fine art skills and then placing them on exhibition, usually at a location within the community. We were fortunate to have Vintage House. And from that point, the pieces that are voted on by the community will go to Boys and Girls Clubs of America for them to receive an award in the competition. November is our Youth of the Year. I think most of you are familiar with that. That's our key program that recognizes our stellar youth within the community or within our organization. 4 finalists are chosen, and this year we were fortunate, which you'll see on the last slide if it comes up, that our youth was in the top 9 of the regional competition. So we were hoping she was going to make it to state, but she did make it in the top 9. December is our community holiday event. We open that up to the community to share in holiday festivities. We raffle off toys, Christmas trees. It's a great community event that we're excited to be a part of. We hope you will join us. A little ways to go. January is our fine arts. Is it coming?
Sorry, no, my apologies. For some reason, it says it's unstable and there's something with the file that's become corrupted. Just for council, it is in your packet.
Yeah.
So if you did want to follow along, it is in your packet as a point of reference. My apologies.
No worries. And like I said, I'm going through it pretty quickly, but I just kind of wanted to highlight what we're doing month to month with some of our members. January, as I mentioned, is our fine arts exhibit. February is our BGCA week. So what we do with that is we take our 5 core values and we spend a day a week really focused on that. And sports, fitness, and recreations happen to be one of our core values and core programs, obviously. That's also when we conduct our NYOI, which is our National Youth Outcomes Initiative. And we do this to get a pulse on how the kids feel about attending the club. And I think one of our most exciting jumps this year as far as percentage-wise and how they felt was the safety at the club. We've obviously had a pretty tough year. And one of the things we've focused on in the last couple of years has really been about not just talking about safety, but making sure our kids really felt safe and feeling like if they didn't, that they could come speak with someone and not being afraid to do that. So our scores there went up about 30%, which was amazing. And I feel like we're doing a good job at communicating that with our kids. Where was I? And now we're into March, which is our this is when we do our summer camp kind of kickoff, basically. So we use our spring break week to kind of do a trial run of any new camps we want to bring and kind of highlight the ones we had before to make sure those are still what we want to offer into the summer. And that basically gets us to our summer program, which you should all have a link to our summer camp as well. I think that's probably where the majority of the funding from the city comes from. Is we run 62 specialty camps. We are sold out every year. We're waiting to see what's going to happen this year. But it really is, they're just incredible. And we're so grateful for the opportunity to be able to give this to our community and give these kids the opportunity to participate in them. We offered $120,000 in scholarships last year. One of the things that I pride our board in was that they really felt like there were a lot of kids missing out on the opportunity to participate in our camp. So the kids that were coming after school weren't necessarily the kids coming to specialty camps because they couldn't afford it. And we really felt like, and specifically the board, that wasn't in line with our mission. And that if we were really serving the kids that needed it the most, then we needed to figure out how to do that. So that was the initiative 2 years ago. It continues to be. Unfortunately, because of the fires, or fortunately for us, we received quite a bit of resiliency money around that. And we're looking to see how we're going to fill that gap this year, but we're determined to offer no less than what we did last year with that. So those same kids have that opportunity. In May, which we have coming up, another great partnership is that we do a community health fair with Sonoma Valley Community Health. We do Earth Day with the Sonoma Ecology Center, and we do Cinco de Mayo with Lulus. So we try very hard to partner with our other community organizations. This is part of your slides as well. Just a couple of keynotes about us. We have 6 sites. We have 55, and you probably heard this at our gala, we have 55% of our club staff are alumni with the Boys and Girls Club who are members of the club. So we think that's pretty impressive. Our average daily attendance was 505 this past year. We're still closing the gap on our fiscal year, so these numbers may change a little. Next year when we do our annual report, we'll have a more accurate budget number and final number for you for our attendance, since we work off of a fiscal year. Let me see, I don't want to, without you being able to read through it, I want to just highlight some of the key pieces. We've had 6 hours of volunteer service that were completed by our teen club members. And we had one of our Youth of the Year who, for her senior project, put on a mental health awareness fair, and we were just really proud of her for that. talking about sports and fitness, we had 876 kids participate in our athletic leagues. We offer those. You'll find the narrative that I didn't have a slide on, but you'll find the narrative that along with this month-to-month member journey, you'll see when we offer those athletic leagues as well. And we have grown that in part due to funding and in part due to we just have a really incredible athletic director, Mindy Neves, if you know her, and Yair Alvarez, who run our program, who are just doing a phenomenal job at marketing and getting the word out to our kids and to our community. We did more than 70,000 healthy meals to our members and 21,000 pounds of fresh produce and food that was made available to the public. So when I wanted to share this with you, because when I think about what we're doing to support the city and for you supporting us, we're really trying to not make that just about the athletic league, but really what we do as for the community overall. And we're fortunate to have that support. Let me tell you, since you don't have that to look at, I did include a little breakdown of our income. Like I said, I didn't want to give a complete budget because we're not finished with our fiscal year. We will be, and I'll be happy to share that with you, Kathy, at one of our meetings. But it does break down our income kind of by our categories, so you can see where our government grants and whether that be state or local kind of fall in. Obviously, we run the ACES program at our schools. And I don't believe that I mentioned that in summer, this past summer, so we're going to see where we're going to land this year, but this past summer we served 474 youth in the summer alone at Maxwell. So you've been there. It's a crazy time of year for us, but we're very fortunate to have the opportunity and very grateful for the city's support.
Thank you.
Questions?
Questions, comments? Go ahead, Councilmember Hundley.
I never heard the number from this year's gala.
How much did you
grossed.
raise?
We grossed, I believe it was around 15,000.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It was a very great year, and it was a bit more than last year, and obviously makes up about 20% of our operating budget. So it's a very important event to us.
Councilmember Harvey, Vice Mayor Harvey. Sorry.
Demoted every day. You mentioned there's a summer camp. So is it offsite or is it at the Maxwell property?
It's at Maxwell.
Okay.
It's at the actual clubhouse at Maxwell Park. Okay. We've had conversations about what that's going to look like with the new developments with Maxwell in the coming year. It doesn't look like, even though we discussed that anything is potentially happening right now through the summer, but I'm not 100% sure. But yes, everything is happening right there at that location.
So that is specialty other than the normal operations that are happening?
Yeah, the
so
camps.
Different thing.
Right. So we're open 7 to 7. We run a morning camp, and then we run a specialty camp. I believe that starts it's from about 9 to 1. That's more. It's more expensive of a camp. So what I was talking about with those opportunity for some of the other kids is that's where you see your fashion design or your coding, or we do STEM camps, maker classes, and so it's very specific for those 4 hours. And then after that, if they go to that, they're welcome to stay till 7 o'clock, or then we have an open camp that is available to our members.
And how many of the free ones did you say you offer? Or how many of the
we're doing
the lower cost ones?
We're doing $120,000 in specialty camps. I wish I knew. I think that came out to be 70 full scholarships last year for just the specialty. And like I said, that's where we felt like we were really lacking. And I really appreciate our board for being so open-minded and so aware of what our mission is, and that we really needed to make sure everyone had those opportunities.
Do you feel like the 70 full scholarships that you're able to offer meets the need that's required at the camp, or are there still kids that are left out?
We fill, so what we have been doing as well is, so we had that brilliant idea 2 years ago, and then we realized that the camps were filling up so quick that even though we had scholarshiped these kids, that we weren't leaving room in those camps. So then the following year, what we did was we ended up saying, okay, well, let's say there's 20 kids in the camp, we're going to leave 4 open for scholarship. So we made sure those spots stayed open because so many went right to us and signed up for these camps, especially those that are watching and could pay for them. I think the need is still there. I think there's so many that want that opportunity. And one of the things we've talked about as well is just transportation issues. During the school year, they can be bussed in. We have that kind of support, but we don't always have that, and they don't always have that. So that might be the next piece of the puzzle. I think we have quite a bit of room to still scholarship more, but.
And sorry,
It's okay.
the kids that aren't able to afford to go to the camp that aren't on scholarship, are they still at the Boys and Girls Club but not able to attend the camp classes?
They can come to the afternoon or the morning camp.
Okay.
They can be there during that period of time. And we, our philosophy is we don't turn anyone away. We're not going to do that. So we're going to figure out how to do it. The specialty camps are a bit different because of the cost that is required with that. But yes, they have that opportunity to come.
Okay.
Just not participate in that particular piece.
Okay, thank you.
So, and maybe you want to stay for this later. We're going to talk about our budget, and there actually is some possible money from the county and also some money we didn't spend in our recreation that I'm not allowed to talk about it now because it's not the item. But if you want to stay, it would be relevant to you.
Well, thank you for that.
Perhaps. I just wanted to say that both of my children have attended camps and the after-school program, and when my kids were there, I think it was like $125 for the whole year, which is amazing because other daycare, and David could probably speak to the current prices of this better than I could, but thousands and thousands of dollars a month. And to have the staff and the other kids and the resources there is tremendous. And also, I think you do a beautiful job of, I think the best way to say it is that it's integrated, that it's not just serving one community, that it's kids from all over town are participating there. And I think that's really important for all the kids to know each other and play together and do camps together and grow up together. And I think that's really important for our community overall. So I am interested, which we'll talk about later, about the funding aspects and what additional things we can do in the summer, because I think we do have a gap in the summer for, just like Rob talked about, making sure that kids have things to do so they stay out of trouble and stay interested. So thank you for coming.
Great. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Cook, too.
Well, I just want to say keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we have a little something. Our board wanted to present this to you guys, so you can hang here somewhere in the chambers or at the.
Oh, I'd love to hang out in the chambers.
Everyone at Boys and Girls Club for our first year.
Thank you so much. Should we take a photo?
Let's take a photo.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Really nice.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob. Sorry about the PowerPoint. That could have been on my end.
I forgot we weren't doing a separate comment.
And with that, I guess we will turn it over to the Vintage House. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here. And I want to start by saying on behalf of our board of directors and our staff, we thank you very much for the contribution to and your support of Vintage House. So I started at Vintage House right before our fiscal year of 2017 ended. And at the beginning of 2018, what I want to do is just take you through what we did in 2018 while we were offering 60-plus classes, and while we continued to work with Council on Aging and provide important services with them, as well as legal aid and AARP and the free tax prep, and all these things were going on. In the background, we were trying to build a foundation upon which 2019 could grow from. So I'm going to take you through a journey of what we did in 2018. We started off the year with several focus groups. We had 30, and those focus groups resulted in a strategic planning process that we entered into. We had about 30 members on that committee that were from the community at large, board of directors, some staff, and teachers, and presenters. So we had quite a broad range, array of people contributing to what would become our 3-year strategic plan. And I know you have it in front of you, but I'm just going to go through a little bit of that. The top goals that came out of that were to rebrand, acknowledging that seniors today are not the same as in years past, to build a fund development plan, marketing and communications plan, which had not been in place upon my arrival. And we had some issues with data, and we knew that to grow into the future, we had to resolve some of those issues. To develop our board, a real intensive look at our board and how we could grow there. We also knew that after the fires, we had to take a look at our disaster planning. So a goal was to create an internal plan and also to work to educate our members and community at large, seniors, specifically. And again, that who are we serving? What do these seniors look like? What do they want? What do they need? So 2018 was a very busy year. Again, while we're doing all the things that we're known for, the services, our free ride program, which is now called My Ride. We changed that name from limo to My Ride. My Ride, we like it. It has a good ring. So by the end of December 2018, we'd created a new logo, which was launched in January of 2019, along with a tagline, which is, we feel very reflective of what we are doing, the work we're doing in the community of helping people to connect, explore, and to create a sense of belonging. We invested heavily in a series of ads that have boosted membership. We created a new communication tool, which is our Friday e-blast, which goes out to 4,000 people with an open rate of 32%, which we're really happy about, and it's been well received. We've created a pipeline of grants for 2019. When I arrived, there were no grants that had been recorded for the past year and a half. And we've done we just have amazing volunteers in our community who have been helping us with data cleanup and financial cleanup. And we've added some incredible strength on our board where we had skills gaps. We now have a phenomenal treasurer who's actually the CFO of the Community Health Center. And other skills that we feel like we have a very strong board that's ready to just take 2019 and go forward. And the disaster plan we came up with internally was just released, and in June, of 2018, we conducted we had a disaster day where we had 650 people come through. We had sheriffs, we had fire chiefs, we had scope people from the scope program, and AAA was there. I mean, we had just people learned about Nixle. It was a really impactful program. A few highlights programmatically from 2018. We launched in July 1st, along with Sweetwater Spectrum, a program called Soup's On. At the time, it was called Soup for Seniors. But one thing we've learned this year is people don't want to be called seniors. We don't know yet what that's going to be, if it's a perennial or an elder. We don't know. We're working on the name, but not seniors. So we changed our name to Soup's On, and we started out serving 25 people every Friday from 11:30 to 1, fresh, nutritious soup paired with bread. And Sweetwater Spectrum provided the vegetables, and we found volunteer chefs to prepare the meals. We now have grown well beyond that. We serve 100 every Friday, and it's become the connection tool we hoped it would be. We see friendships blossom, people connecting, making new friends. They can roll from soup into a TED Talk or into cinema and psyche, or there's so many things. They can spend a whole day Friday at Vintage House. We are planning to expand that program pending some funding we've applied for. But it's just been remarkable to see this. And then we have now a rotation of chefs. Cafe Le Hay has participated, Swiss Hotel, Girl in the Fig, and some private chefs. So it's really taken off. We're very proud of that. We launched Wednesday Night Out, and again, pending funding. The pilot was successful. We know that in providing evening programming, we can reach the younger seniors who are still working. And then we merged our Thanksgiving celebration with that of the community center, and it was phenomenal. We loved seeing the two groups come together around Thanksgiving, and I think we served 500 people. And Vintage House was responsible for the desserts, and we learned we have a lot of bakers in our community. It was amazing smelling all those treats coming through. We had not had a volunteer appreciation event for a while. We had 100 people come and be celebrated as our volunteers. And our chorale, it keeps growing. It's amazing to see seniors singing and engaging in that way and celebrating with the community twice a year. We launched a senior service project with Sunrise Rotary. So I think you see a theme of a little bit of collaboration in here. We're working in that direction. The senior service project has been getting out to homes and repairing fences and water heaters and roofs and cleaning garages and helping people relocate. So we're expanding that as well. My ride went from offering 3,000 free rides to seniors in 2017 to over 4,000 in 2018. So it is growing, and thank you, Denise Wilbanks. Is she still here? Yes, she is. That's our transportation coordinator. So those are some of the highlights of 2018. We saw quite an increase in our revenue, and we attribute it to we applied for 5 grants. We received 4 out of 5 of them. And again, those grants, there were no grants on the record prior to 2018 for at least a year and a half. We launched an annual appeal that was very successful. That had not been done in over 2 years. We've increased membership through our marketing efforts. Our classes are, we're getting close to being at capacity. I can't believe there's 300-400 people walking through those doors every day, coming to learn and grow, and it's just really inspiring. We've increased the number of trips that people take, and we've made them profitable, which they had not been in the past. So I think you can see there's just a pattern in 2018 of cleaning up, building that foundation. And the biggest thing, well, not the biggest, one of the biggest things we did was we were funded by Impact 100 to conduct a very intensive survey of the 55-plus population in Sonoma Valley. We have the top-line results. The full report will be out in about a week, and I can't wait to come back and share that with you. There's been some surprises in terms of who we're serving and what we need to change as we move forward into the future. We've already begun to take the top-line results and modify our programs. And so one thing we're really looking at is transportation. How do people move? Housing, what can we do? So we're starting to work with Share Sonoma County and with the shelter to figure out how we can become part of the housing solution. Because seniors, we know from this survey and from our experience day to day, are suffering from the rents that are rising, and we are seeing more and more homeless seniors come through our doors, and a lot more scholarships being applied for. I would say in 2018, we had many successes. I would say a couple challenges that we had is our fundraiser, we acknowledged, doesn't perform the way we wanted to, so we have just decided to completely remake this. We're changing the date, we're changing the month, we're changing the format, and it's going to be on September 15th at Ramekins from 3 to 6. It's a Sunday afternoon. We're taking it out of November, out of the evening, out of the cold, out of the dark, and it's going to be a very lush garden theme, and our very own Jay Rook here in Sonoma is going to be the MC, and that's going to be, you know Jay, he's going to wear some sort of funky suit, we know. It's going to be fun. The other challenge is our transportation program. The need is great. Again, 4,000 rides. Our county funding was slashed, and we are operating the program at a $35,000 deficit. We are coming up with creative solutions. We formed an ad hoc committee trying to figure out how to close that budget gap. The one solution on the table of many was, of course, well, is this a program that we should close? And the resounding answer was no, we cannot. This is an impactful, important program to this community. And these seniors, if we were to close this program, 1,200 of those people, 1,200 of those rides are to Vintage House to come and take advantage of programs. And the rest are to areas like CVS gets quite a large hit, Sonoma Market, Lucky's, Safeway. So if we close it, these people may not get to those places, and they may become more isolated. And that's one thing we feel very strongly about, is combating isolation for seniors. So we are trying to look at creatively to how to address this and make this program at least a break even. So stay tuned on that. I just wanted to let you know there are those challenges that we are tackling in 2019. So our new fiscal year started January 1st, and what you will see and what you have in front of you are the goals for 2019. To build more community partners. We've already, yesterday, had Carlos Reyes at Vintage House, and we had a full house, 200 people coming to hear some live jazz. It was a collaboration with the Jazz Society. We're looking at working on some various food projects with the teen services, and of course the art exhibit with Boys and Girls Club. And we continue to explore therapeutic things we can do at Vintage House in collaboration with the community center. So we're very excited about some of these programs that we'll be launching this year. And we have a pop-up store coming, so stay tuned for that. Denise has taken that on. That's going to be a pop-up store to benefit My Right. And again, the new logo launched. We're really excited about that and everything that's falling from that. So we are already 1 quarter into our fiscal year. We are seeing revenue growing above and beyond last year's growth, so we're very excited about that. We are, as I said, with some of these, with our fundraiser in limo, My Right, excuse me, working to combat some losses, and but we have a very proactive board and a very committed staff, and I'm confident that we will rise to these challenges and continue to serve our 1,700 members and those who come through our building but aren't necessarily members, those who are engaged with us. So that's all I have for now.
Great.
Any questions for me?
I have a question.
Sure.
Well, first, thank you so much for your leadership, and it's really exciting, all the things that are going on, and refresh that you've led. So I'm very impressed with that. I guess I'm just wondering, and I don't have the details about this, so I apologize for this being vague. It was said to me some time ago that Vintage House has like a $6 million endowment. And how does that work? So with regard to needing funding, like for the My Right program, what is the role of your endowment, and what do you use it for?
That's a great point. So the endowment, we're actually looking at how that's being invested so we can increase the income from that, because that would be the prudent thing to do. But of course, like any nonprofit with an endowment, we do have some restrictions as to how much we can spend down. This year, they did take some of that endowment to achieve some of these things: the research study, the marketing, the redesign, the cleanup. Part of that was funded from the endowment. But the board is committed to try to preserve that, and they are looking at what we can do with it to benefit the community.
How much is it?
It's $6 million.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
You were right.
I heard correctly. I didn't know if that was just a
You
rumor.
heard correctly.
Okay.
No, it is.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Councilmember Hundley.
First, I wanted to thank you for your interest in working with Share Sonoma. There's a lot of amazing things happening there.
Indeed.
Also with SOS, and it's heartbreaking to hear stories about anyone sleeping outside, but especially seniors. And senior women. It's just breaks my heart, and I'm really glad that that you all are keeping that in mind and working with organizations that can help prevent it. Share Sonoma, a very fascinating concept for people who have extra bedrooms and would like some monthly rental income. You can have a cool new roommate.
Well, and from our perspective, it's not just the housing of that's for the seniors who are struggling financially, but it's also a benefit to a senior who needs a little help, but not yet enough to have home health care or to move to assisted living. So it's a win-win on both sides. So we see possibilities on both sides of that, which is
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you hear from over in Europe these sort of interesting roommate situations between college students and seniors or elders or
Norway's
whatever our new name is going to be. Yes, exactly. And
Norway's
it's-
doing a lot in that regard, and I follow their practices.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. And the study, I am very interested in hearing the results. I think 4 years ago, one of my council goals was to do a survey of our senior population. We never did that. And it's important information for us to know because we have a very high number of seniors or elders, whatever we're going to call.
Well, and
this
we
group
got
of
a good
people.
read on the Sonoma Valley seniors because it was, we put it out to our members, we put it out to those engaged but not a member, and then we put it out to the community in a blind format to about 5,000 people. We bought a list. So it's very comprehensive, and it's showing us some incredible things. So I can't wait to share that report with you.
I'm excited about that and things that the city can do to better care for our aging residents. I would love to know, and even I think about things like, recreation on the plaza or the bike path, and things that we could do to be useful to more of our
Absolutely.
residents. I can't wait to find out about it. But thank you so much.
And we did plant some questions in there that were given to us by the hospital and the health center and other people other nonprofits that had something they wanted to know, given that it was a fit with the overall survey, and the researchers made those judgments. So
Totally. And the last thing I read about in the news sometimes is some cities are, I don't know if there's a certification, but there's a training to be, say, dementia friendly, sort of protocols in place for if something happens. Like that's one thing that I think would be just nice to have in place for, whoever in our city would benefit from it. But I think could be lots of things that we can
absolutely.
think about.
Yep, absolutely.
So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Sure, I'm very appreciative that we're able to fund both of these programs, serving both our youth and our seniors. I guess we got the community center to serve people in the middle, or other than that, there I guess they're just at work before then. So I really appreciate it. I've been to a lot of presentations at the Vintage House and some high school dances there, and went to the Boys and Girls Club and was on a basketball team where we won one game, so we're really proud of that.
Character builder.
The only time I've ever been the best player on a team. So there you go. But I really appreciate your presentation, and I think the research that you're doing is going to be really useful, and the programs that you're running, building community is what it's all about. And I'm really, really thankful to have you guys in town. So
Well, thank you. Again, thank you for your support.
Councilmember Cook?
Well, I was the only one up here that is a member of the AARP. Never thought I'd say that, but yeah. I think they start at 50, so I think I'm 3 years into it. Just want to say thank you, and I know
welcome.
whenever we reach out to the Vintage House to help with Safe Needles or different programs, I know that the Vintage House has always been there, so
Absolutely.
thanks for being part of the community.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And now on to the consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, the council may decide to change the order of the agenda. Are there any council comments? I will take it out to the public. Is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on the consent calendar? Seeing no one, I will close public comment. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries 4001. Absent.
Oh, one.
That one's voting from home.
What? Who abstained? Oh. Okay. All right, it happened. Okay. Okay. And on that note, on to the regular calendar. 6.1, we are going to hold a study session to provide direction on commercial cannabis, our regulatory ordinance, including proposed buffer maps and permit process and responsibilities.
Great, Mayor Harrington, members of the council and community. So we're here tonight to hold a second study session with the city council about commercial cannabis. Mr. Storr, our planning director, will be lead, and I'll let him introduce. We also have with us Jeff Walter, our city attorney, and Tim Cromartie. I always mispronounce your name. Okay. Tim is with HDL Company, which is the company we have hired, and they're working with hundreds of cities on commercial cannabis across the state. So the purpose here is really to kind of go through, staff has been working on some of the ordinances that will be going through Planning Commission. These ordinances are thick, think 40, 50 pages. And so as we are putting all them together, we really wanted to come back and do an update with you and just make sure that at 30,000 feet, hitting your policy direction before you really come in and we finalize everything within the actual ordinances. So we've got some presentations and some questions from you, and I will turn it to Mr. Storr.
Good evening, Mayor Harrington, council members. David Storr, Community Planning and Community Services Director. Do a little bit of a recap and then kind of go into some of the things that we're thinking of with respect to creating a process in our municipal code to allow for certain commercial cannabis businesses. Our first slide tonight will recap the action of your discussion on March the 4th. And this is more make sure that we got the things right that we heard. The first slide here, there's basically only 14 slides, and I can go through them pretty quickly tonight. The first one is with respect to the types of retail licenses, storefront, non-storefront. Your council directed to allow one of each of those. Manufacturing, there's actually about 5, I think, manufacturing types, of which the council is interested in allowing for the 2, the N and the P. I'll get to the other types of cannabis manufacturing types in a moment. Actually, I'll do that now. There's a 7, which is for, because I'll forget later. There's a type 7, which is for your volatiles, a type 6, which is for your non-volatiles. The N is for your infusions. That didn't come out right. Infusions and
pioneers.
Yeah. For your edibles, and then the P is for your packaging and your labeling. There's the 5th one is for S type, and I'll explain that a little bit later when we get to the next slide. Then you spoke about having one testing lab, and more if we could get them, but we're starting out for one at the moment. We also talked about distribution with respect to transport only, and certainly I'm not an expert on the many types of type licenses, but if we get into that, we can talk about how that will work for type 13 licenses for retailers. We also talked about allowing deliveries to residents within the city by cannabis businesses outside of the city, similar to the way that we have it for our medicinal deliveries at the moment. The council also talked about storefront being in the commercial zone, and then and that zone only, and then allowing for commercial non-storefront testing labs and manufacturing also in mixed use as well as the commercial zone. There was a prohibition discussion on cultivation, distributors, and micro businesses. And that 5th permit type that we found out, or I found out about, which is a relatively new permit in California, is an S permit, which allows for the ability of a licensee to share their facilities, their cooking facilities, or their kitchens, so to speak. And with a prohibition on type 7 and 6 licenses, this particular S shared license can only be used with your direction with a type N permit, which would be the infusion type of permit. So we can talk about that and how that will work if it was the intent of the council to allow for N and Ps would you then, if somebody comes and knocks on our door, allow an S permit? For example, an N permit may not use their business on a Friday, and maybe they could allow that to be a shared facility with somebody else that only wants it on that one day.
This would be like a shared kitchen?
A shared kitchen, yeah. And my analogy was maybe they do dark chocolate Monday through Thursday, and somebody wants to do Friday. Why not? So anyway, your direction also talked about geography. So we've tried to formulate the geography based on the direction, and forgive the coloring job, but I tried to highlight the specific locations of interest or non-interest as far as the locations you talked about.
Can I just ask a quick procedural question? So I know the Planning Commission had a session about this. Is the intention that we're going to meet tonight and then it will go back to Planning Commission again, or this is the final meeting?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. The Planning Commission basically had an overview of your March the 4th meeting to bring them up to speed. There will be 2 ordinances coming, and I'll get to that in the last penultimate slide where we talk about the next steps going forward. You'll see how that lays into the presentation of the 2 ordinances that I'll talk about specifically.
Thanks.
So basically 4 location areas or figures, if you will, that talk about the location of where commercial cannabis businesses can locate. First one was the prohibition around the prod. We then placed 600-foot buffers around the high school, middle school, and also the elementary school on the south end of town along Broadway. And that pretty much is a 600-foot buffer. And by the way, the buffer around the prod is not a 600-foot buffer. It actually expands within inside the 600-foot, if you will. But if we drew it on there, it'd be a lot larger than that in some places.
What's the state buffer?
So these are prohibition areas, is that right?
Yeah, these are the buffer areas where where these businesses will not be able to locate. This is what I call the three school locations, and then also the preservation, if you will, the exemptions to the buffers, allowing the 3 commercial centers, the Whole Foods, the Safeway, and Sonoma Market.
Sorry, David, go back to that one if you would. Just, Council, your direction on this one, the planning staff first did the 600 buffer, and because there's a lot more commercial space on this, rather than just doing the circle, and maybe there's a property, is it half in, half out, it felt like we really needed to have a little more precision here. So that is what the planning staff has done. So this isn't a full 600, it's close, but then carving out, again, the Safeway shopping, Sonoma Market, Whole Foods, and there was one additional property next to the Whole Foods shopping center that Vice Mayor Harvey talked about carving out. So those have been carved out and are not included in the buffer, and then this is what's left.
Thank you. And it's also very similar to the prod, because that doesn't match this perfect 600 radius as well. There's some logical reasoning, and it's easy to explain the boundaries. The one going back to the schools here, that could be problematic, but in the case of where it's residential versus commercial, we could do something very similar and try to go around the streets to make it easier to understand and describe to people rather than just trying to get a compass out and getting that radii to work. The last one is around the Sonoma Little Leagues and their baseball stadium fields. So tonight I want to explain a process, but that basically will allow a commercial cannabis business to go through a 3-phase process. Number 1, they would go through I want to call it, for lack of a better word, a beauty contest, where they would submit applications to the city when that day is over, and we can then take a look as a city council, look at the merit of an application after it goes through a process, and I'll get to that in a moment. So if you can remember the 3 components, there's a ministerial beauty contest, if you will, that then will go to you as a city council. You'll offer out a conditional certificate, it's called a CC certificate, that will then allow people to then go through the land-based permit process of a conditional use permit. And that would typically go through the Planning Commission and ostensibly go to you as a council upon appeal. Then there will be, once that process is concluded, there would then be a commercial cannabis business permit issued by the city manager, which will be a ministerial permit. Basically, that permit will then bless all of the activities that have occurred prior to it. And this next one actually describes it a little bit better graphically. You can see that the beauty contest, if you will, is called a selection process, so I'll try to refer to that in the future. This particular process would then allow proposals to come to the city and be evaluated. And based on their merits, if they get to a certain ranking or score, they will be forwarded to the city council as qualified finalists. And there would be a process of appeal if somebody got a 50%, let's say, and felt that they scored higher or should have scored higher, and they can be appealed. The goal there being that we would try to get the appeals, and also those that did meet the merit test of 80% would come to your council at one time, depending again on the volume of applications that we receive. Once the council determines which particular commercial businesses you'd like to see move into the next phase, you would then issue them a conditional certificate that would then give them. You would not be obligated to give all of them away, or even 4, a maximum of 4, or you could go to 1 or 0, depending on how you feel. Even if they pass it along to you as a finalist, a qualified finalist. Once that conditional certificate has been issued, those particular selected applicants can then submit a conditional use permit where it will go through the traditional planning commission process, your environmental review, whether it's categorically exempt, whether it's a negative declaration or an EIR. I really don't know how we would give you a timeline for that, but for purposes of discussion tonight, we've put 4 months or greater, depending on what needs to. There will be one discussion on the next slide that will talk about this second phase, if you will, because to me it's the most problematic with respect to can an applicant get the commercial cannabis conditional certificate, get a use permit, and get all of the building permits and construction work done within a 1-year timeline that we're thinking about. And should the council wish to speed that or slow that, that'll be a discussion we get into in just a few minutes. But again, the third of the 3 components here would be the confirmation process, if you will, the ministerial process where after they've gone through the planning commission use permit process, the issuance of building permits, assuming that they are needed. They may need a sign permit or something else from the building department. At that point, when everything's done, perhaps occupancy has been granted or is likely to be granted, then they would go through a ministerial process of knocking on our door and saying, look, we've done everything we were required to do. The city manager would then say, yes, here's the actual commercial cannabis business permit, the CCBP. And I've just lost all the slides. Oh. We're back. So again, getting into some of the detail here, we're almost done here. The selection process again talks about getting to the point of having some qualified finalists, issuing them that conditional certificate. We've outlined here some of the criteria that's necessary that we can require from particular applicants. To the right, on the right side of the slide, you'll see that there's some questions regarding things that we're interested in receiving feedback tonight regarding who would be members of that proposal review committee. Is it the chief of police, myself, the city manager? Probably wouldn't recommend the city manager at this point because that person could kind of remain aloof and not disinterested, but more engaged at the ministerial permit. But that's certainly up to the council. Secondly, identifying the site during the process. Does it happen at this point? Does it happen at a later point through the use permit? One thought would be that it may be interesting to know if they meet the thresholds of the buffers, if they meet the threshold of the zoning districts. But I wouldn't imagine anybody would apply if they didn't already know that they met those criteria. So whether the council is interested in having the identification of the site, this would be the part where we could get that direction from your council. Another component of an application would be to have an applicant list the type of community benefits that they want to bring to our community, whether it's 400 jobs, 4 jobs, whether they're providing any contributions to the community, also any other economic incentives they're bringing. These are things that have been done in other, excuse me, these are things that are listed in other ordinances that we've seen from other communities. I'm not quite sure of the actual specifics, whether it's some kind of an annual payment to the city, not in the form of a tax, but in some other kind of monetary contribution. I'm not sure. We can get more finer detail on that. But again, to see if the council is interested in pursuing that line of thought. Again, the last bullet here, as I've noticed, provided is the timing necessary, thank you, the timing necessary to be able to complete all of the things necessary under the conditional use permit. And again, the concern that I have is I may have somebody come into a shopping center that may just need a sign permit, have very little TI to do on-site, inside of a building at a shopping center. But if it's actual massive remodeling and restructuring because of the security things on the interior, I would imagine there's a little bit of work to do because of the way people gain entry into the retailers per se. And that's probably the one area that I'm more concerned about is can we get it done within a year, 18 months? I'm not sure. There's a lot of variables there, depending on the site. The second process, which would probably take more of my time and staff's time, and that is the issuance of the conditional use permit, where we talk about parking issues. We spoke briefly about that at the City Council previously. With respect to the traffic management, in talking with other people within the business, this is not simply a very typical shopping center type of traffic flow. That's something that the Planning Commission will be able to look at. Hours of operation. For example, in our cannabis deliveries that we have right at the moment, we have a prohibition between 11 at night and 7 in the morning. So again, we would need to look at those kind of things as to the hours of operation of a business. This can be done at the conditional use permit process. We haven't thought much about hours of restrictions for testing labs or manufacturers, but that might be something that the council would provide direction to us. In addition to increasing or decreasing the buffers, perhaps. Planning Commission can look at those kind of things. One thing that I've noticed in looking at some of the ordinances is a prohibition on outdoor storage. There's a lot of discussion about signage content, whether you allow big signs, little signs. There's the obvious question about the content of the signage, which is going to be a problem as far as what it can say or not say. One area of concern that I have, and that is the signage twirlers, whether we have the ability to prohibit them on public streets or not. It's a very difficult part of the law that I'll defer to council on, but certainly other jurisdictions have tried it.
What are they?
Sign twirlers, the guys that...
Oh, people, okay.
Yeah.
I thought we already prohibited sign twirling. Or maybe that's automated
Well, there's also,
signs.
there's a difference. I was going to mention automation as well. I've seen some creative ways to get around that. And so I'll obviously be talking with Jeff about whether we can have a unilateral declaration by a proposed cannabis business, if they can, of their own free will and choice, declare to us that they will not do that within our city limits at least. I don't know if we'd have any jurisdiction outside our city limits to try to ask them not to do that. I'm not sure. But anyway, signage is a really big issue when it comes to what we want to see out there and the method of illumination. Odor and security are big issues, along with garbage disposal, and also the Planning Commission can look at conflicts with other land uses and adjoining uses. Again, on the last component of the three, the detail here would be the issuance of the commercial cannabis business permit. Again, actions of the city manager would be appealable to the city council, assuming there are any, and then the business would then open for business once, again, this is all predicated on the fact that they've got through the conditional use permit discretionary process. They would have a year to operate, and we'd be able to kind of get to look at how things have operated, and then they get to come in for a renewal process. A couple of things that I, again, wanted to talk about here as far as policy from your council, and that would be the ability to issue a cannabis delivery permit. We haven't really talked about that before with you as a council, but there's a lot of talk in the world, in California at least, regarding the ability of deliveries within and outside of our city. Also, if you should wish to have a restriction on the delivery times, we're currently looking at establishing those deliveries between 8 in the morning and 8 at night, as an example. The next steps, as you talked about earlier, there will be two ordinances. One, making amendments to Title V, which is the permit process that I've just talked about, the structure. Title 19 would be the discretionary process of the conditional use permit. We tentatively plan to go to the Planning Commission on May the 9th in a hope that we can then get direction or recommendation on those two ordinances to your council in June, such that we can then have the adoption occur before July the 1st, which is the date that we have for the ability to adopt the ordinances without going through a prolonged CEQA review, or one that I haven't really done a whole lot of studying about, because I'm really trying to get it done before July the 1st anyway, so that we can get this process started and implement your direction. Along with the two ordinances, there are resolutions that we've been discussing internally with respect to the cannabis delivery permit, transfer fees, registration fees, appeal fees, background check fees, and such. There's about a half a dozen that I can think of. There's probably more. This basically concludes my presentation. We have, again, Tim Cromartie from HDL here to answer the really hard questions. And also Jeff can provide direction too. He has a lot of experience with the ordinance that we've been reviewing in other communities.
Great, thank you. Council questions? Vice Mayor Harvey.
So, what specifically do we need direction on? There's a variety of different things, right?
Yeah.
But we'll be doing direction after public comment, right?
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's a question.
How you doing?
Yep.
I mean, that was a question, but we will give the direction after public comment. But what do you need direction on? Sorry.
Okay, thank you. So tonight, if you'll see the graphics to the right, I think we can start with this first slide, talking about if there's any preference that the council has with respect to the composition of the PRC. Do you want to have that applicant provide any information as to the location other than the fact that they think they'll comply with the zoning and the buffers? Are you interested in us returning with any other direction on, or asking Tim perhaps, direction on any kind of incentives that you're interested, or maybe the answer is zero? You could give us direction on the timing of the timing necessary for a business to be able to complete and start their business, to get the conditional certificate and start their business. Is a year good enough? You want to try that out first? You want to give them 18 months? You know that a conditional use permit, for example, can be extended. They're good for a year, but they can be extended. But how fast do you want this process to start? Do you want it to kind of go fast, slow, medium? It's kind of a question at this point.
So maybe just a few of the things. I think one concern staff has on the 1 year, depending if there is an initial study and if the complexity of the site that maybe gets selected, if it does take longer. I think council's been clear, you want this process to move as quickly as you can. The one concern we have is if, let's say we're at month 11 and they still need 2 more months, but then they got to go back to planning commission to extend, it creates another step on the process for them and us that may not. So you might want to, say you're going to give someone 18 months. It doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily take the 18 months. I don't think they're as eager to move forward as you are, but it potentially creates another step in the process that maybe you don't want to do. So that was really a question to bring up to you. The other issue is in terms of the site, and a lot of places, as we've learned, would have both the selection process and the site combined. But these are cities that are much larger and they have a lot more sites. So if you end up having 10 vendors that come through and 4 have sites selected, but let's say maybe of those folks, 3 of those are not your highest people that you want, and you've weighted sites being more important, then maybe those folks raise to the top, and maybe you want to select your vendor first, figure out how that is, and then let them go out and find a site, which is really what staff is recommending. You kind of break it. But you may want to know if they do have a site. So that's really a question, because it's, as staff puts this together with HDL, there will be kind of an application process. Here's what's required. And we want to make sure that we have the information that you want in front of you. So the whole site piece is a little bit complicated. So we really want to make sure that we're bringing you at the end what you want. And so we want your input on that.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
One of the things that has been happening in the cannabis industry that I've learned about is you'll have companies that'll come in, they will get access to a permit basically, and then their goal is to sell that permit. Their goal is not to open up a business, but their goal is to sell that permit. Has that been considered throughout the process as far as?
Yes, we actually have the ability to regulate the transfer, the revocation. Those components will be in there. These are That's a finer detail, but yes, that's part of it.
I commend David in trying to distill 50 pages of ordinance into a 15-minute presentation. It's really difficult. He's talking as though you sort of have this ordinance in front of you a bit. 1-year timelines, they need to be extended. It's a little unclear what that applies to. One of the major factors that drives this process in the fashion that's been described to you is CEQA. And we try to create a procedure that allows people to apply without having to do CEQA up front, because CEQA is expensive and it takes time. So the first tier of this 3-tier process that Dave is explaining to you has nothing to do with CEQA. It's basically a background and business assessment process, and that's why HDL may be involved in that assessment, because they have experience in the business component and the operability and the viability of various proponents who come forward saying that they want to operate a cannabis retail store, for example, in the city of Sonoma. If they have $47 saved up for that, and they've got their brother and sister and their in-laws to help them operate it, and they've never run a retail store before, they may not get rated very highly. And we have HDL here to help us, because it's going to be obviously way more sophisticated than that. We may have some very large companies coming from out of state or from other areas that are going to be putting together packages of information that will be heavily financially weighted. Pro formas, business plans, we're going to want that information, and we need some assistance from experts to discern and distill what's being proposed and to find out whether that's going to work. Plus, we want to get the background of these people. Do they have extensive criminal, I'll call it experience, that may cast and again, we need to have that kind of background information and criminal background checks being performed by the chief. That information will come together, will be rated and ranked by a group that David has referred to as the Proposal Review Advisory Committee, or the PRC. And that's made up primarily of probably staff and HDL and other experts who will then rank these proposals, and then those who are ranked high enough will be submitted to the council. And you will then decide who the finalists are for each of the types of licenses that you're allowing in the city. Those people will not be entitled to open their doors or start business with what you give them, which we are calling a conditional certificate. They cannot start business at that point. That gives them a ticket, a pass, to begin the environmental assessment process by applying for a use permit. David has referred to a 1-year period. The 1-year period is basically arbitrarily selected at this point in the draft ordinance as the period within which a person who has that conditional certificate awarded to them by the council to apply for a use permit, do the environmental work, and build out whatever improvements they're entitled to build out. That has to be done within a year. But the ordinance does provide for the city manager to extend that period for a reasonable period of time. I think right now it's not to exceed an additional 6 months. That period is up to the council to select whether tonight's the night to do that, or it's to do it at the time that you're looking at the draft ordinance with recommendations from the Planning Commission. We leave to you. But the goal here is to create a period of time within which the awardees of these conditional certificates must move with some alacrity to apply for the use permit, do the environmental work, and build out the improvements that they need to build out, and locate a site if they haven't got one yet. Obviously, you can't apply for a use permit unless you have a site that you're seeking a use permit for. And have all of that packaged together and done, and they still can't open for business under this scheme. They then go to the city manager and say, I've done all the things that the city council's wanted me to do, all the things that planning commission has wanted me to do, I built everything out, give me a operating permit. And if the city manager sees all these little she just has a checklist, bing, 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 bing. She gives them a permit. The next day they can start operating. That's the overarching scheme of this process.
So what does that mean about transferability of the permit?
I'd like to address that. I wanted to just talk briefly about best practices and what HDL has seen with the about 125 cities that we've worked with in terms of helping them establish cannabis regulation locally in some form. There is a provision in the ordinance that absolutely prohibits transfers, because that has been problematic in the past, particularly with alcohol licensees. You get into trouble, you transfer the license to your brother-in-law, and you're off on a clean slate regardless of how egregious your violation was. So they're absolutely prohibited in this draft. That obviously is subject to change based upon your review and perhaps recommendations from the Planning Commission. But in terms of best practices or what most cities are doing, for example, with regard to site requirements, most cities require an applicant business to have a site identified at the time they file the application. It simplifies things a great deal, and it saves time, and it will certainly expedite the land use evaluation process. There are also, if we are selected to do the application review and to assist the city with that, there are other components that we cannot properly evaluate unless the business has selected a site. One of those components has to do with neighborhood compatibility. Are they doing outreach to the neighboring businesses? Have they contacted, if there's residents in the maybe 300 to 500 foot radius, have they contacted the residents? Are they doing what they can to introduce the idea and sort of take the temperature of the affected properties around them? So things of that nature, and also for purposes of expediting the CEQA review, God forbid it won't come to that, but if it does, you need to have the site identified at the earliest possible date.
Councilmember Hundley.
So have you worked with, so that makes a lot of sense to me, but I worry about us being so small and the opportunities for these locations like pretty limited. Like, have you worked with cities who didn't have that as a part of their selection criteria? And I mean, is it workable sort of keeping it open for them to sort of go out and pick from the limited batches of places afterwards, rather than it being like a speculating thing where everyone's just going to rush out and get something and hope that they can get it?
It's definitely workable. It just, the cautionary note is that it will extend the timeline. That's all. But it can definitely be done. I know of only one city that has allowed applicants to submit applications without having a site identified, and that's the city of Pasadena. And that, we don't know how that's going to shake out yet, because frankly, we're still in the process of evaluating the applications. So it hasn't moved forward yet.
I have a question about the criteria for review. I spoke to someone who has a dispensary, and they told me about some additional criteria. One of them, I can't remember exactly how it was worded, but basically that they had a commitment to communities that had been disproportionately affected by drug sentences, and that was one of the criteria, that there were different like kind of social justice criteria that could be included. Can you talk about that?
Yes, that is known as the social equity component. And
Can you say it again? Sorry.
That is known as the social equity component. The phraseology that we normally see is those residents or communities adversely affected by the war on drugs, to use a colloquialism. That is your option, whether you want to include something of that nature. Many cities, a growing number of cities, are including that as a requirement that they'd like to have the business incorporate in some form or fashion into their business plan, into their community benefits. Some businesses take that with more seriousness than others. Some of them will have I hate to use the word quota, but they'll have a hiring quota for they want a certain percentage of their workforce to be folks from those communities. Others will say, well, we'll have an internship program where we'll bring people in and train them.
Work for free?
Right, which is not ideal, because you want everybody to be an actual employee in these businesses. But others will take the approach of, well, we'll be a business incubator for members of the community adversely affected bypass criminal justice policies that would like to start a cannabis business of their own. And we'll bring them up to speed on track and trace. We'll bring them up to speed on, business operations, et cetera. So it's up to you. It can be included in as detailed a fashion as you would like. And it's sort of a challenge to the applicants to see, well, what are they going to do with that? And you can then rank them depending on how pleased you are with how they've responded.
I'd like to include that, but Vice Mayor Harvey?
With regards to employment, what sort of things are we allowed to require there? Are there minimum wage requirements that we can do specifically for this industry? Can we look at preference if they're unionized? Can we write regulations that they must recognize a card check? Like what can we do?
Well, state law requires some things. Absolutely no employee can be under 21 years of age. Businesses are all required to sign a labor peace agreement, which stipulates that if they reach 20 employees or more, they are required to allow a union to come in and potentially organize and unionize their workers in exchange for a promise that the workers will never engage in work stoppages, strikes, things of that nature. So that's already a requirement, and you can explicitly request the business, because it's already required in state law, but as part of your application process, you can explicitly request the business to sign and show you a labor peace agreement that they've already entered into, or to enter into one if they haven't done it already. You can have a city or regional preference on hiring. It can't be too set in concrete, because you can run into equal protection claims, and you don't want that. But you can set those types of bonus points for local hiring, things of that nature.
Can we set a higher minimum wage for it? Could I say if you have a cannabis facility, you have to pay employees $20 an hour?
Living wage is about $16.50, I believe, which is 150% of the state minimum wage. That's typically what cities ask for, and it depends on individual cities. Some cities are more or less labor friendly, so some may not have it in their application materials at all, but you can require a living wage.
So living wage would be the maximum that I could require?
Well,
is living wage a term of art, or is it just anything you pick?
No, it's actually about $16.50. So it's based on.
Our living wage ordinance for city employees is $17.38, right? And so,
well, it depends. It may vary from
city to city. But I'm just asking, can I go higher? Is it legal for me to require one that's higher?
That I don't know. I would hesitate to answer that without you checking with your general counsel. I do. The maximum I would recommend would be living wage.
Okay.
Depending whatever that is in this community.
Can we legislate things like health benefits, sick days, anything like that?
I believe you can. You can require that. But again, there are Cal OSHA standards. There are labor peace agreements. If you mandate anything that's significantly above and beyond state requirements, just be prepared to defend it, because you may be challenged.
Can you ask on the application what the wages and benefits will be?
Oh, absolutely. That's a routine question.
And then can you rank their score based on wages and benefits?
For that portion of the application, yes.
Are we allowed to rank completely arbitrarily, or is there like a set ranking? Is there things that are automatically preferenced over other things, or can we set our own preferences?
If you rank arbitrarily, you will risk a lawsuit.
I mean, not arbitrarily, but like, is there a set that location is ranked at this level, it's worth more than wages,
Yes.
is worth more than this?
Yes.
There's a set.
And cities
way
are
to
all over
rank.
the map in terms of the weight that they give the different categories.
I don't mean it like arbitrarily, but just like we can design our own
Correct. Yes, you can.
ranking system. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
If I could just have Tim, Mayor Harrington, explain something more about the community benefits. That's a little bit of a fuzzy area for me. And that may have been some of the things that we were just talking about.
The community benefits portion of the application is largely what you make of it. It can be, essentially it's a question for the applicant. What are they willing to do for the community in order to incentivize you selecting them? How are they going to be good civic partners? Will they, and the responses run the gamut. Very often it's in-kind donations to the school district, to the Boys and Girls Club, to the Police Activities League, if there's an active one in your city. Some businesses will take the view that, well, we'll donate a percentage of net profits or a dollar amount, whichever is greater, above and beyond. And this is the question: if they decide to do that, if they decide to donate that to the city general fund or to a community benefits fund, under the direction and control of the council in terms of how those monies are spent, the next question for them will be, would that be above and beyond a local cannabis tax if we enact a tax? Or are you saying that this will be in lieu of your tax payments? So it runs the gamut. They will often say that we'll participate in civic events, we'll become members of the Chamber of Commerce, and those are sort of more feel-good things. They're not really substantive. So what you want to see in response to that question is some concrete commitments of whatever type. It doesn't have to be money, but it has to be something that's concrete, tangible, and you can quantify it somehow.
What's the accountability for that? Do they become conditions of the use permit, or?
Whatever they say they will do gets included in the language of the conditional use permit, so they are clear on the fact that, okay, you said you're going to do this, now it's attached and written into the conditional use permit, so there will be some accountability, and they may potentially have their permit at risk if they don't fulfill their obligations.
That would also be a part of their narrative that we would require post-conditional certificate prior to application, would make sure that was one of those components.
And maybe just one other question on that. So the fee at this permit, that when it's renewed annually, we can charge a fee for the annual review of the conditional use permit, et cetera, so we can collect.
Yes, because the goal of all the fees of that type is 100% cost recovery.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
So usually with these, it sounds like usually with these community benefits agreements, it's kind of, we say that we weight community benefits and then the applicants come and say what they're going to do. We're not like, we want a concrete commitment, so we want you to make sidewalks or like something like that. We don't have a specific recommendation for them.
Well, some cities have made recommendations in the form of, they have a list of organizations that they think are worthy. You've obviously had presentations on some of them here tonight that they think should be prioritized for assistance of whatever type the cannabis businesses are willing to render.
Any other questions? No, I'll take it out to the public for public comment. If you'd like to comment on this matter, please say your name, spell it, and where you're from.
Cool.
Guess no one wants to be first. David Eicher, Loma Court. There's a lot. My one concern would be if you make something too difficult for someone to actually, open up a cannabis dispensary, you're not going to have one before the ballot measure that comes up in November of 2020. And if you don't have one in place and that passes, then the city basically loses all control. So I think that's something to keep in mind. I don't have all the answers for you, which way to go on everything, but that's something to keep in mind. My one main concern, I'm not really concerned about buffers around schools because, the students, walking by cannabis dispensaries are not going to be harmed by walking by one or anything. I do get the point of a student who is 18 and has a medical cannabis card being able to walk across the street from the high school and then take it back into the high school. I think that's a legitimate concern. The one area that I think that I don't want to see a dispensary is on the plaza or too near the plaza. I think the prod is a little bit too small. It should be extended out to maybe 2nd Street East for that area. And there's various reasons why I don't want to see one on the plaza. One is the parking. You're going to have, a lot of, if it's successful, a lot of people coming in and out, and I mean, so it's going to need the parking and you have some traffic. But also the plaza is, it's historical context. I don't know if you want to have one on there. But also the plaza is a place that the city is promoting its history for tourists to come. And I don't want to see, I don't want to see this become a tourist attraction. Hey, look, we have cannabis here. And you come into the city, you can do wine tasting on the plaza, get your cannabis, because then, they walk across the street into the park, and if they have bought a joint, they'd be smoking it. This is from Green State. It comes out about once a month in the Chronicle, in the Sunday Chronicle. It's all about cannabis. And included in there is from Santa Cruz, cannabis. What's the best cannabis dispensary in Santa Cruz? Also in here is what cannabis can learn from the state's wine industry. And so we've seen elsewhere up in Oregon, them trying to do a wine and cannabis together. So, that concludes my time. And just one quick question: does commercial include the gateway commercial area? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Wow. All right. Well, with that, I will close public comment. And we had one question: is gateway included in the commercial zone?
Not at present. Your direction, I'm just going to go to the slide there. Oops, there we go. Your direction on the 4th of March was such that the storefront would be allowed in the commercial, and then everything else, the manufacturing, the testing, and the non-storefront would be in the commercial and the mixed use.
So it's mixed use.
Right, and so you could actually include another category of the commercial gateway into the retailers if you wanted to do that.
Thank you. Take it back to the council for comments. Who would like to start? Councilmember Hundley?
Well, to make sure I cover all the points, do you want to start with that slide? And is the useful exercise of this evening to see if anything on these lists are things that people do or do not want? This one. So for the criteria, so I'm not interested in adding a lot of hoops for people to jump through. I think that a lot of the justification for allowing these businesses was because it's a beneficial product to our community, and it's legal in California, and it's something that we think we should have here. So I don't know if I'd consider having like an extra credit question for those, the community benefit or the social equity, but I'm not interested in making that a requirement for this, because I just really want a successful business to come to town and operate according to our conditions and everyone be happy with it.
Can I just ask a question about that?
Yep.
Would that be, say, you would not want the community benefit option there for somebody to voluntarily fill in, or you just don't want it there at all?
I think it could be an optional, but I just think it's like a bonus question, and I wouldn't even want the whole decision to depend on that. Because even on the, I see the sort of the rationale and sort of paying into like certain organizations or programs to maybe offset something or another, but that's also why we're going to consider talking about a cannabis tax, which is going to be used for the exact same thing. So I see that purpose served as coming from tax revenue, and we will sort of spend it on that. But I'm always open to community collaboration. I just don't see any reason to put more restrictions on this type of business versus every other business we have in the city, in light of the fact that they are already going through far more regulation than any other business that we have here.
I say it again, the way that you do, it would be an extra credit kind of a thing where you would actually then assign if you choose. That might be the difference between one applicant
It
and
could
the
be
other.
certainly be a tiebreaker,
Yeah,
and
right.
I think it could indicate, more of a willingness to sort of be involved. But I also think that, thinking of different businesses where they are in their development, a much more established business could offer something like super shiny, whereas another business, maybe they have one other shop, they're doing really well, but they just don't have the capacity to just start giving that much stuff away. So, and then. Going to the vice mayor's comment, the living wage part of it is something that I find interesting, but probably nothing beyond that as far as required criteria. And then, I mean, for this list, I think that everything looks nice. It seems like the things that are kind of open to discussion are, we have the members of the proposal review committee. I agree that it should be a sort of staff level, non-political group to review. I had heard that maybe there'd be a potential of having the Sonoma County cannabis person maybe involved with this. I don't know. But
Our initial thoughts were the chief of police, myself, and maybe the finance director, legal counsel, but certainly we can include.
well, just someone maybe who had seen some of these things before, finance for sure, definitely, and you. And then I've been thinking about whether, getting someone from the chamber involved. I think that maybe from like an advisory position, it would be interesting to hear some perspective, but I don't know how influential I'd want it to be. And then as far as identifying the sites, I'm really torn on this because I see the benefit and why it would be far more difficult to not have this information. But I also see this as creating a very unlevel playing field because some businesses will have the money to sort of lock down a site in hopes that they're going to be successful. And if they're not, they're going to be fine. Whereas other businesses are not going to be able to invest in that. And I just think that we're going to have very limited opportunities for where these things can go. So I don't know if there's like a middle ground of maybe like, having like a letter of intent from a landlord or some sort of intermediary step, rather something short of, having a place secured. But I think that that is going to be a complicating factor. So I don't know, and if there's more insights to offer, I would love to hear it.
Yes, often what you'll see is a contingent lease agreement that the applicant submits with their application. And basically it means we have a space contingent upon being awarded a permit. We have a landlord who's agreed, a commercial landlord who's agreed to rent a particular property.
Have you ever seen a landlord that signed multiple agreements? Because I guess it would be.
Not yet.
I guess it'd be a place like ours where it's only going to have one.
Right.
Where if it's a great spot, they could have like 10 letters.
Right.
Sure, whoever gets it.
Well,
they're gonna have to work it.
only not for the same property. I've seen multiple agreements, but not for the same property.
All right. Well, that's the one that I am just concerned about. I just don't want to create a disadvantage for some of our like local companies to get involved. And then as far as the timing to review, I do want to have an incentive to keep this rolling, but I also recognize that things sometimes take longer than people think. So I think as long as there's some sort of mechanism for a review and extension, then I'd be fine with that. But I do want to, whoever gets this, they need to either be in or out. That's it.
Councilmember Cook.
Well, I'd like to start off by saying that the criteria, for review, I'd want it to be fair. So I would be supporting the site information because I think that would make everyone at the same level playing field. And I think it would be beneficial to know, exactly what they plan because it does sound like my colleagues on the council do want this to be expedited. So I think that would be something that would, be fair. I like the community benefit because the local component, I think at that moment, we can kind of see, what are they going to give back to the community? And I think that's very important, in this process. And that's it.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Harvey?
Just to start off with a question, there was a local preference that we could maybe do. So if we said we'll give preference to you if you have a dispensary opened in Sonoma County, would that be something that we could maybe do? Could we give preference to where they've opened businesses before?
You can do that, yes.
Okay, cool. As long as it's not too tight, so it's somewhat fair. So in that way, we can kind of give preference to our local businesses. To me, I agree with David. I think that the community benefit's an important piece. There's people in this community that don't want a cannabis dispensary. This is a new business. I wish that we could do more community benefits for more of our businesses and require that as part of it. I wish we could do that with tasting rooms and things like that. And so I think that having community benefit be a weighted thing, just so that it's not going to completely exclude them if nobody does it. But I think it's important to give back. And I think it makes the industry a little bit better inside of the community. I think it makes people more accepting of them. I think it creates a more positive view of the industry as they come in. From tax revenue, people don't necessarily see the benefits of that, but if we can directly say, okay, this company is doing this in the community, that's a big benefit. There are problems with this, though. I recently toured Cannacraft, and they want to do a bunch of community outreach, but people don't necessarily want them involved. And so it's like
Sponsoring
they don't want to like have them sponsoring Boys and Girls Club, because then that seems weird. But they'll take tons of money from wineries, which is an interesting conundrum, and it's just kind of the culture not being where you expect it to be. But they still go out and do tons of yard work and street cleanups and all kinds of stuff. And I think that it doesn't have to be expensive. Community benefits don't have to be expensive. They can be reasonable, and they can be company time. Living wage, I think, is really important to me. I'd like to see at least that. I would be willing to discuss beyond that for sure. There's other things that I was going to say. And for me, I think that in Sonoma, in all honesty, we want somebody who's established. We want somebody who's open to few. We want somebody who's on top of this. I'd rather them be kind of a little bit more local grown if that's possible, but I want to know that they're of the highest quality, and that's why we're doing this process. The other thing, and this is what I was going to say, one of the most important things to me, and this goes to one of the things that David mentioned, no matter what we do and where this is located, tourists are going to go there and purchase cannabis for sure. And so for me, I want it weighted that they're going to be making people aware of what the actual rules are, that they cannot ingest smokable cannabis in the plaza, that edibles, you cannot do this in public. I think that's a super important thing, because we have people that are flying in from all over the country, from all over the world. They want to experience cannabis as part of it. That's one of the reasons people come to California. They want to drink wine. That's why people come to Sonoma. And so you are going to have cannabis tourism. They need to be remade aware of the rules at the point of sale. And I think that's a really important piece for this community if we're going to have this stay a community benefit and not create a lot of problems.
Proposal review committee.
I think what David has proposed is totally logical. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. No problems with that. Identify site as part of the application. I'm fairly agnostic about this. I kind of want to know where it's going at the beginning, but I see how this would kick out people that don't have a set site, and I don't know how highly weighted this would be. I do see a scenario where, how many then can we even get, right? Then we could only get maybe 5 or 6 applicants, right? Because there's only a few sites that are going to be eligible. The one question I have for you, Tim, is how many applications do you expect? Like, if you just ballparked it, when you see a city of this size, how many applications do they get if it's not connected to site?
We have seen probably in the low teens. Okay. Not a lot. Okay. You won't be inundated. But part of that is available land use, and businesses are certainly aware of the fact that Sonoma is relatively small. But low teens is what we would expect.
Okay, that sounds manageable. Yeah, I'm agnostic about this. I'm willing to be convinced either direction. 1 year may not be an adequate amount of time.
I'm very nervous about the 2020 ballot initiative, though I think if we're constantly moving forward in this process, I think we can put out some messaging that says we're doing this. This is going to take this out of the hands and say, you know, people that are pro-cannabis, you should be wanting it to go in this more regulated way. I think that we can do some messaging and beat that initiative, because it's, if you really read into it, it's pretty, in my opinion, kind of extreme.
Maybe just one point for council. Again, if council has talked about wanting to look at some kind of a tax, you're probably putting that on the November 2020 ballot. So you have a tax measure on, so you're communicating public information about the tax measure. You can also, again, you have the impact report. You can provide public information about the initiative as well. So I think there'll be opportunities to have some public information provided as part of that process.
So in terms of the criteria, I do think it's important to ask about the social equity component, and I think especially with the predicted corporatization of marijuana, to have all the communities that have been, you know, devastated through drug laws, and at least call the question and bring it to the forefront of our minds that that's something we should be doing, whether it's just an exercise to remind ourselves that that's an important thing, or, you know, hopefully actually done. I think that's a good statement of values. In terms of the community benefit, I also think that's really important. And same thing with the living wage. I think that was a great suggestion. I'm really glad you brought that up. And I also think, like, going forward, you know, it is our role to try and make sure that the people of this town have the best available jobs. That's one of the things we're doing with the minimum wage, and to make this town what we'd like to see it. And there's so much talk about young people not having economic opportunities to live here, which includes not having good jobs. And so to the extent that we could be in a win-win situation where people want to open these businesses here, and we are going to require them, or we are going to select partners who are committed to workers who have rights and dignity and the best possible benefits that are socially minded. I think that's fantastic, and something powerful we could do. I would hope that these businesses would set an example for other businesses about things that matter and compliance, and that they would do it in a positive way to say, you know, hey, we're so proud that our workers make $20 an hour here. That would be fantastic. And I hope that we have applicants that are minded in that way, and that we make we weight our criteria to express to the people applying that those are our values as well. So I think some of these things are, you know, we need to make sure that we have people who know how to run one of these businesses. That's, you know, that's foundational. But beyond that, it really is a chance for us as a council to say who we are and what we expect for the people that live here, and what we're going to ask people to contribute if they want to be part of this community. So I think that's actually an exciting opportunity to do that, and that's really important to me. In terms of the site application, I wonder if there's a way where we can, I guess maybe it's a weighting question, to make it clear that it's not necessary to have a site, or figure out something like the letter of intent, or some way, since there are such limited options for getting a site. I mean, I would imagine any landlord that has a site who is not adamantly opposed to this type of business would just take the winner, you know, because, I mean, I just would imagine that would be the case. So I would want more information about how to not make it a deal breaker if they haven't secured the site yet, but I would like to know. And I specifically from Sasserini, I know there has been a lot of concern about a dispensary opening near that school. And so that would be a question for me, what the site is. And then I don't particularly like the idea of the community benefit being a donation to any particular charities. We have that with a number of other programs we do, but I think there are other benefits that they could contribute to. I don't know, with parks, things like that everyone can share. Housing fund, yeah, so good idea. In terms of the timing, I think that 1 year with an extension is fine. I would prefer if it would just be on a consent calendar for the council so that we would know what was happening and stay in the loop. And then in terms of the final sign off, I would want to know under what conditions, assuming all the conditions are met, basically that it would not be discretionary, that if they met the conditions, they would receive the permit. And I'd want that to be spelled out. And then for the proposed review committee, I don't think the chamber executive director should be on there. It would be my preference to have 2 members of the city council part of that, especially just to see all the applications and have somebody on a subgroup to know about it. And just given the, I mean, this is a qualified group, but given the importance to the city council that this process go very, very, very smoothly for the first one, I would feel more comfortable if there were members, elected members, looking at all of the applications just to make sure that the voice of the public is at every stage, personally. So I think that's all the questions. And with that, does staff have any other additional information they need from us?
Well, I can tell you, at least my pen's been going pretty quick here, but
Okay.
I didn't get consensus on the proposal review committee. I think I heard staff only versus a combination. So if we can get clarity on that, that would be helpful to me.
Councilmember Cook?
Yeah, I would agree with Mayor Harrington, with council members on ad hoc.
Just to throw something else out there, what about commissioners as well? Because they're going to ultimately be part of that process.
I'm going to discourage this because this project review or proposal review committee prepares recommendations to go to the council, for the council to make the final decision. So it doesn't really make sense to have members of the council on this advisory or this recommendation body that goes to the council, because the council members who are on that then have already created their own decision. They're predisposed to a given result. They're committed to the recommendation. And I think it casts the process in a less objective light. It looks as though this sort of been rigged. So I think you want to avoid that. I don't think there should be any elected officials on this committee. It should be primarily technicians and business people who are evaluating the merits, the business acumen, the financial capabilities of the applicants. It then goes to the council. The council makes the final decision with all the information in front of it.
I guess the question is whether all of the applications are shown to the council or just the selected ones. Councilmember Hundley. Is your hand? No, your hand's up.
Oh,
I'm calling
I have
you.
comments, but didn't you just ask a question?
That was a question, yeah.
So, would you like me to wait for you to get an answer?
We can put that in there. I think the goal was I think the thought was if you had 300 applicants, not quite that many, but how do you get it down to a manageable level for the council? And I think that's why the 80% was there, but we can certainly, if we get half a dozen or a dozen and a half, I don't think that'd be a problem to kind of get those to the council.
I think my question is, all of the weighting is inherently arbitrary. Are they, there's no, I give it a 3, it's like a job interview. You gave them a 3, I gave them a 5. It's all subjective, I guess. Arbitrary is the wrong word. It's subjective to the evaluator. So at the end, when we get some ranked choices, it is subjective to the business community and the city staff. And there is another perspective that I think is valuable, which is the elected officials representing the people, their subjective opinion as well. Councilmember Hundley.
Yeah, I think this will be all in the sort of criteria that we lay out, and there's some things that I think would be, that lend themselves to being far more subjective, and that would be sort of not what the staff level vetting would base decisions on. But I think a lot like the financial component of having, someone look at the business plan and sort of make sure that this is a company that is going to know how to operate in the way that we want it to. It's just kind of picking out the people who are all going to be viably successful businesses and then present them to us, and then we can look at all of the sort of other components where it is. With the community benefit, there's no way you could draw the guideline for staff to pick it. So that I don't think that should be something that would be at that level. But it's just the things that would be deal breakers of things related to finances, or even having HDL as a part of it. Having seen so many different businesses, it'd be far easier for someone that's dealt with the industry to identify what could be successful versus us. And I do think that politics has to stay completely out of that, because there's going to be plenty of politics when it comes to picking the actual people that get the permits.
Councilmember Cook.
Yeah, I want to go back to Mayor Harrington's question, or talking about the ad hoc. The reason I would like to see at least one elected official, or possibly elected official, and maybe somebody from the Planning Commission, is for transparency. If we can't get that, what I would like to see is the transparency of the scorecard after, if there's 13 people or 13 companies that look into it, where we can look through the scorecard and find out why, because we're talking politics here. Politics can always go the other way. We were all elected, to the city council to make decisions for the city of Sonoma. Staff wasn't. That's nothing, saying bad. That's just saying that that's the truth of the matter. So I think that Mayor Harrington, not speaking for her, and myself are just looking at how this can be as transparent so nobody's crying foul at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
So maybe I'm wondering if Tim can maybe talk, because he's been inside the tent when they've done this a little more, and maybe speak to this. I think there's a way, there's definitely ways to do this potentially where all the application, I guess one question is to Tim is how much of some of this information may be proprietary? I don't know, in terms of the financials, or is all that released publicly? So there's just a question. I'm not aware of that level of detail. So maybe can you speak a little bit to what this has looked like in other places?
Well, you've thrown multiple questions at me. Let me start with the issue of the weighting of the various categories. The council has the ability, working in concert with staff, to craft and weight the categories appropriately, as you think they should be weighted. That is typically what's happened. Obviously, it's going to happen with staff's input, with the input of a consultant if we're involved in that. But I have seen, with good and bad results, councils will step in and say, no, we want it weighted this way. We want community benefits downgraded. We want financials way up there. We want past experience way up there, but knowledge of the gray market, not so much. So you do have the ability to engage and shape that. In terms of transparency and why the scores shook out the way they did, we typically produce reports when we're evaluating the applications that will clear up any questions as to why applicants scored the way they did. And I have to tell you, you may have a desire to see all the applications. Some of them are frankly not going to be a good use of your time. Some applications are clearly undercapitalized. They're just not ready for prime time. But understanding the council's issue about transparency, if you want to see all the applications, that certainly can happen. But in some cases, you may realize this was not a good use of my time. Regarding the proprietary aspect of it, unless it deals with something that HDL has crafted ourselves, there's no information that's not going to be available to you.
And the public?
Well, some information is not appropriate. For example, name, address, not name, but address information for cannabis businesses, that can be a very sensitive issue, because they are disproportionately targeted for armed robbery in many cases. The financial information should probably be considered confidential. I'd have to check with my my principals at headquarters, but I imagine the financial information is not necessarily just willy-nilly subject to public disclosures. There's got to be some aspect of confidentiality.
Oh, Vice Mayor Harvey.
So
These are bank statements, et cetera.
I really like David's idea of having a publicly kind of noticed what the scorecards were if we're not going to have members of council there. And obviously we can redact a lot of this information, or at least have the scorecards be like, okay, the financials weighting was very low. And, maybe there can be like a quick little summary of why the financials were viewed as low. That doesn't go into great detail. So if we could have that kind of...
That is typically what we provide.
Oh, okay. So that's already kind of what we're going to
if there's
get.
an issue with undercapitalization, or the business plan wasn't terribly sophisticated, or it absolutely lacked some core components of the security plan, didn't provide for a criminal background check at all, in fact, didn't mention it, we'll highlight those things.
Great.
Also, I want to point out too, the process works, I think, to the council's end objective, as I understand it. The process is that the applicants will all be ranked. And if they don't achieve a score, let's say of 80 or better, then they are rejected. All the rejected applicants, however, have the right to appeal that rejection to the council. So you'll get a self-winnowing process anyhow, so you won't have to necessarily read all the applicants because there will be some who will not appeal the rejection.
And I largely agree that we shouldn't have members of council on this committee. I think that there is enough transparency throughout this process. I think that having it be kind of as much like a normal business permit, although it's not a normal business permit, is kind of the right way to do it. So I'd rather see it. And then at the end of the day, we're going to get to weigh in on it at the end, right? They're going to bring permits that have cleared to us, and then we're going to be able to go through that process and look at them and overview their whole system. So I think that is the correct way to do things, especially if we're going to get the information about why they passed or failed. And then they have the right to appeal. I feel like it's a fairly transparent process. And who do they appeal to?
Well, and that was the thing I was going to make. Yeah. So the idea was to, if somebody gets a 62 or a 75 or a 79, they can appeal that. We'll bring those people that want to appeal at the same time that we bring the 80%ers as well, the qualified finalists.
And that the fact that they are appealing to the council is another excellent reason why council members at least should not be directly involved in the initial application process, for the reasons Jeff already stated.
Cool.
Okay.
So are we still where we were before I asked the question?
I think we should. I think we have enough direction to come back with a slate, and you'll be able to see in concrete terms the identification of the people that the staff believes should be on this proposal review committee. It'll be primarily staff with some consultant expertise. I think that's what you're looking at coming back to you. And you can mull it over once again. The Planning Commission's going to get a shot at it too. So you'll have the Commission's input also, and you can make your final decision when you introduce the ordinance.
Okay, anything else?
Yeah, I just have the one slide here, and that would be with respect to the council's desire to have an S permit available.
Councilmember Hundley.
I am intrigued by this S permit. I think that in light of the other uses, although if we're only going to have, say, one manufacturing, so then is it going to be, would there be a use for this permit if there was only going to be one person using it, or is this sort of anticipating a day where there would be
There would have
multiple?
to be more than one manufacturer, obviously, because if it's a manufacturing space where edibles or infused products are manufactured, then you would need at least two manufacturers, because the shared space is intended to be shared by like licensees. In other words, if I'm a manufacturing business and I'm only using the space 3 days a week, and 2 days of the week it's vacant, I would allow a second business, smaller perhaps, to come in and use it for those 2 days of the week. But they would have to be a manufacturing business.
So this would always require then at least two permits, sort of like operating at the same time. There'd be the shared whatever, and then the people who are manufacturing have the manufacturing, and so it's sort of like an overlapping. Or can you have just a shared and it includes a manufacturing, and it's just if you have another manufacturing, then you could share your space?
The first, the primary licensee would own and operate the space. That would be the business that had it 3 days a week.
And that's the S? So it's a S is a manufacturing.
The second business that comes in to use it 2 days a week would get the S license.
I see. I'm intrigued by it. I would be interested in either talking about it now or maybe having that be a part of phase 2.
Councilmember Cook.
I strongly oppose the Type S permit.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yeah, I think this may be a question let's just go with, single businesses operating single spaces to start. We're going to review this permit, I'm sure. Future councils will review this permit, I'm sure, to open up for more dispensaries and more cultivators and micro businesses and all types of different stuff. We're not doing cultivators, but it's I think that's just keep it simple, one business per thing, and then or per location, and then move into type S's as needed in the future.
I agree with Councilmember Harvey. We can move forward with what we have now and see how it goes. Anything else? All right, I would like to take a short 5-minute break. Not the long And I would like to take if I can, a small mayor's prerogative, and I forgot one dedication tonight, and that is to Mel Taylor, Bob Taylor's dad, and he recently passed away, and I'd like to also dedicate this meeting to him. So, and now on to item 6.2, which is a presentation by the Sonoma County Water Agency regarding the Sonoma Valley Aquifer Storage and Recovery Pilot Test, and I will turn it over to our Public Works Director.
Greetings, Mayor Harrington, members of the council. It's exciting. It's an exciting project to talk about, this aquifer storage and recovery pilot test. Groundwater banking is another way it's referred to. I think we were fortunate to be selected for this pilot test to see what would happen, bringing water to Sonoma when it's plentiful, storing it underground and pumping it back out to see if that's a viable option for us in the future. Had a great team to work with on this, including Sonoma water staff, and Marcus Trotta, hydrogeologist, will be doing the presentation, and a great team of consultants also working on this. And our city staff got to work with the team as well, helping with the construction and the monitoring of the pilot test project. So I will turn it over to Marcus for the presentation.
Thank you, Colleen. It's really happy to be here to share some information with you on this kind of new project for the region. In addition to collaboration with your city staff, which has been really helpful for this project. I also just want to acknowledge our consultant team, GEI Consultants and Pueblo Water Resources, who are experts in the field and have done a lot of these projects throughout the state. As described, I'll be talking about a recently completed pilot study that was done just across the street at the near the Veterans Memorial parking lot near one of your city's municipal supply wells, and it's actually the first of its kind. It's the first pilot that's been done in the North Bay region. Oops, hit the wrong button. So I'll be starting out just giving you an overview on kind of a regional study of groundwater banking feasibility that was done here in the region, and then give you a summary of the pilot study that we completed this past year, along with some preliminary results and next steps. And so just kind of starting with some of the drivers for this type of initiative, and it's really all about managing both your surface water supplies and your groundwater supplies together, and specifically looking at wintertime surface water when we have lots of it, and taking advantage of that at the time, putting it underground for storage to use during the summertime or during droughts to help meet peak demands or get us through times when water supplies are less plentiful. And you'll see some of the kind of the regional drivers on the left-hand side with our regional water supplies. We have a biological opinion that affects some of the stream flows in the Russian River and its tributaries that can, in some cases, limit supplies during the summertime. You may have seen the Potter Valley project recently in the news. There's some uncertainty associated with that project in terms of its future supplies, and there have already been reductions in those supplies coming to our Russian River system. There's a lot of uncertainties with respect to climate change, future droughts, and Sonoma Valley in particular is vulnerable to seismic hazards. The aqueduct that brings your water supply from the Russian River that we deliver to you crosses a number of active fault zones, including the Rogers Creek fault zone. So having a reliable groundwater supply here in the valley is going to be really important to help address those things. On the right-hand side of this slide is another driver that recently came about as the state developed new legislation and laws with respect to groundwater management, and Sonoma Valley is required to comply with the Sustainable Groundwater Management. We have a new agency that formed here in 2017, a groundwater sustainability agency. The city is a member of that agency. Your council member David Cook sat on the board for that agency last year, and Councilmember Hundley is currently serving as a director on that board. And their mandate is to sustainably manage groundwater resources here in Sonoma Valley. And this type of technology represents kind of one type of tool that's in a toolbox that can help us get us to sustainable management here in Sonoma Valley, in addition to things like conservation, recycled water use to offset groundwater supply. So it's something that could be helpful in terms of sustaining the overall water supply here in Sonoma Valley. So the feasibility study that we initiated was completed in 2013, and we partnered with the city as well as a number of our other water contractors here in the region, and just kind of looked at, you know, what type of, how much water is available, what's the quality of that water for banking, where can it be put, where are there good aquifers to place that water, where is there piping that can bring that water to those aquifers, and then really got into some of the more technical issues in terms of water quality interaction and aquifer type that's needed for this type of project. And so just kind of starting with the source water that's available. And so what we're talking about is using drinking water from our system to store underground. And so that water would come from our riverbank filtration facilities that are on the Russian River up near Forestville, where we've got one of the largest riverbank filtration systems in the world. We're really fortunate that we have really high quality water that comes out of that system. It really requires minimal treatment. Just chlorine is added for disinfection. And as I'll show you, in comparison with other projects that have used surface water in other areas of the state, our water really is one of the highest quality waters that's been used on these types of projects. This slide's a little hard to follow, but it's showing essentially that we have plenty of water, especially in the wintertime, available from the Russian River system for even a pretty decent sized groundwater banking program. This looks at a conceptual 5,000 acre foot groundwater banking program. An acre foot is about 300,000 gallons of water. And in the blue are the flows in the Russian River on a monthly basis. The green shows the capacity that's actually within our transmission system, so how much water we can actually get through the pipeline. And then the red shows this kind of 5,000 acre foot program. And we see that, you know, during the winter time, we'd pretty much always have available water for use for recharge and later recovery. This slide just shows a comparison of our drinking water quality with other regions that have done aquifer storage and recovery projects using surface water. And I'm not going to go through all of these different constituents, but just a few that are notable is that the disinfection byproducts that come from the chlorine treatment is something that's closely looked at by the permitting agencies. In this case, that's the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And those form naturally in drinking water and are present in all drinking waters. And in our drinking waters, they're much lower in comparison with a lot of other areas that are utilizing surface water. It's also really low in dissolved organic carbon, which means it has a low potential for clogging well screens, which can be a problem in some areas when you're recharging through a well. The regional feasibility study kind of looked at general conceptual alternatives in Sonoma Valley as well as in the Santa Rosa Plain groundwater basin, looking at different types of aquifer characteristics. For these types of projects, it's best to have an aquifer that's capped by a layer of clay or some other relatively impermeable unit that allows that water to kind of stay where you're going to be putting it. And so they use that to kind of identify some good areas. You're also looking for areas that actually have some good storage volume. And one of the challenges that Sonoma Valley faces in terms of groundwater management is that we are experiencing groundwater depletion, particularly in the southern portions of the basin where we've seen groundwater levels dropping over the last several decades. But for these types of projects, that also represents kind of an opportunity because it's making space for conventionally managing surface water and groundwater supplies and having some room to put that surface water when it's available. So just the general concept of aquifer storage and recovery is shown on this diagram here, with wintertime water coming from the Russian River being conveyed by pipeline to wells. In this case, this would be in the city of Sonoma. That water is injected through those wells and stored underground to make it available for later use. The feasibility study recommended doing these pilot studies, kind of small scale pilot studies in an incremental fashion. To test out the technology in different geologic environments and different water quality environments. And so with Sonoma Valley, even prior to this new state groundwater law, we had a study of the basin done by the U.S. Geological Survey. There was a voluntary groundwater management plan that was in place here since 2007, and a group of stakeholders that representing a number of different interests here in Sonoma Valley sat on a basin advisory panel and looked at groundwater issues and recommended different projects and actions, and this was one project that was recommended by that advisory committee. Having that voluntary plan also gave us the opportunity to get some state funding, and some of that funding we were able to use to drill a test well across just about 60 feet away from the city's municipal well there between the Overlook Trail parking and the Vet Center parking lot. And that test well is what we actually used for this this pilot study. The city's existing well number 6 is over, I think, 60 years old, and so we were able to construct a newer well and have it actually have some good information from that well for use in the pilot study. And so that was actually a big help. And so the overall approach for the pilot study, this was permitted, as I mentioned, through the Regional Water Quality Control Board, which is responsible for permitting the water quality aspects of the project. It was determined to be exempt from CEQA because it's essentially doing data collection. And then, the overall time frame of the pilot, it was initiated after we received the permit last March in 2018, and it was about a 6-month project where we recharged and then later withdrew about 12 acre-feet of water in a series of cycles, and I'll show you what those look like. We did a really extensive monitoring that I'll describe in terms of water levels, water quality. Anytime you mix 2 different types of water, there's going to be changes to the chemistry of that water. So that was really an important component of this study, is to understand what those types of changes look like in this specific situation. The local conditions, as I mentioned, we have some groundwater depletion occurring here in Sonoma Valley. This map shows an area where groundwater levels southeast of the city have declined below sea level. And we have data actually from the city's municipal well that demonstrates there have been declining groundwater levels on the order of about 12 feet over the last the 5 years in this area. And so just again kind of demonstrates the need to manage and sustain those groundwater resources. The local geologic conditions, this is a geologic map on the left that shows the test site kind of right in the center of the map, with the hills to the north mostly made up of volcanic materials, and then sediments to the south that are clays, sands, silts, and gravels. And the test well is shown on the cross section to the right, and it's actually completed within sands and gravels that are kind of sandwiched between volcanic layers. And so we have a pretty good cap of volcanic lava flow on top of the aquifer that we were doing the injection and recovery into. So the pilot test itself, as I mentioned, was about 6 months in duration, 3 different cycles, each one a little bit longer than the other. And the injection was done at rates ranging from about 55 gallons a minute up to 80 gallons a minute. And then the pumping out was done at, I think, a little over 100 gallons per minute. We completed the study in September, and we did a whole suite of chemical analyses on the study, as well as gathered a lot of water level and temperature data as well. These images just show some pictures of the site, the manifold that the city constructed at the wellhead, and this is where the city staff really stepped in and did a lot of support work and provided a lot of help in readying the site and in adding some of the equipment that was needed, and actually also performing some of the monitoring activities for the project. And I think city staff was really helpful in doing a lot of the day-to-day monitoring that was needed for this project. So some of the preliminary results, our consultants are still wrapping up a draft report that we'll be submitting to the regional board that'll have some recommendations to it. This is some of the data from this report. This is showing groundwater levels during the pilot test, and in the black line is the groundwater levels in feet below ground surface from the actual test well, and the red line is showing the groundwater levels in the nearby municipal well. It's about 60 feet away. And essentially the injection cycles are shown in blue, depending on your computer screen, it looks like, and the withdrawal cycles are shown in green, with storage cycles shown in orange. And what we saw in general was that groundwater levels rose about 50 feet during the injection cycle. They never came closer to 20 feet below ground surface, which is good. You don't want water kind of squirting out of the ground and when you're doing your recharge. In the nearby test well, those groundwater levels increased about 10 feet or so, about 60 feet away. So that provided some really good information for potentially looking at a larger or more full-scale long-term project. The other thing we looked at really closely, as I mentioned, was water quality. This map just shows, or this diagram shows the concentration of different constituents that are in the water, with the blue being the surface water that's injected. It's kind of percent of sulfates and chlorides and different things, and the red being the local groundwater. And we could track to see how that changed over time during these periods of injection and storage and recovery. I mentioned the disinfection byproducts. That was something that was looked at very closely as part of this test in the aquifer, and we saw them increase both during the injection and the storage phases of the project. But then during the recovery phases, they dropped down to pretty much non-detect levels, and we're always well below the state thresholds that are set for disinfection products. Never went above half of that level. So some of the preliminary findings are that the aquifer does have the capacity for storage and recovery. We demonstrated this with about 12 acre-feet of water. The two types of waters are compatible. Their geochemistry is compatible. We didn't see any adverse reactions when we mixed those two types of water. The well screens were stayed very clean during the process. There was very little evidence of clogging during the test, indicating that both the well and the aquifer are good candidates for aquifer storage and recovery. And using that data, the consultants have estimated that using the existing test well, kind of a long-term, full-scale program could potentially store about 40 acre-feet of water per year, and a more, appropriately designed or a newer aquifer storage and recovery well could potentially store up to 80 acre-feet of water per year. And I think, just for some context, I think the city's groundwater use over time has fluctuated, but has ranged, I think, from about 100 to maybe 200 acre-feet or so in the past. And so it could represent a sizable offset of the overall groundwater use for the city if that was something that the city was interested in pursuing. Our next steps are to continue conducting the evaluation of the pilot test results, prepare and submit this report to the regional board this spring, and then further assess the potential for full-scale programs, including, really, as Colleen and I were talking about earlier, the cost for wintertime water. In order for this type of project to really make sense, there would likely have to be a reduced cost for wintertime water in order for it to pencil out for the city and other users, and that's something that we're exploring as well. And then also assess potential for additional pilot studies in other areas, both in Sonoma Valley and in other areas of the county.
Vice Mayor Harvey's first. Questions?
So you're putting treated water into the ground, so it's got chlorine content already in it. Is there any concern about that at all with regard to environmental impacts or anything like that?
With regard to environmental impacts, there's really minimal concern. It is drinking water, so the water that we're putting in is the same water that's coming out of your taps, and it's going into an aquifer and not into surface water where there's aquatic life. These types of projects are done really throughout the world. One thing that can be looked at is removing that chlorine before injecting it, and that would, in which case that wouldn't be an issue at all. However, that chlorine's put in there for a reason, to reduce pathogens in your water, and it also serves, if you don't have that in there, you could have biofouling of your well screen and have those types of problems. So it's kind of a balance, but that is something that the regional boards are definitely interested in, and there's a statewide general order that's been developed for aquifer storage and recovery projects that lays out what's needed to do to comply with the requirements specifically for those disinfection byproducts.
Okay. And then the water, I saw that it gets cleaner, basically the water that we're pulling out of the well after injection gets more potable. We're still treating that with chlorine, obviously, on our side as well? Because I toured the wells and we're, okay.
Right, we do.
Okay. And then
to give a more complete answer to that, this was a pilot test, so when we pulled the water out of the ground, we weren't putting it into the city distribution system.
Yeah.
Councilmember Cook.
Great study. I've been watching this for a long time, and I'm glad that it sounds like it is successful. But I did have a question. I know, and I just wanted to get answered from you, because you probably know a lot more about this. About 4 or 5 years ago, there was a big debate in Sonoma County about adding fluoride to our water. Came to all the councils. I remember speaking about, I was really concerned about fluoride because of the water banking project. Is the county of Sonoma, that fluoride issue, has it gone 100% away, or is this something we could be coming back?
Yeah, it's hard to say whether or not it'd be coming back again. I know that was something that was looked at the time, and there are other cities and other water districts that are doing this with fluoridated water, but it does add another component that needs to be monitored for and looked at, because in a lot of cases the fluoride in that treated water is higher than what's in the native groundwater, and that's something that triggers additional monitoring requirements.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to bring that up because as a reminder to all of us, I mean, we want to be protected with fluoride. Children, they could get the drops possibly in their school, not to get a debate on that issue. But I think when we do look at this water banking, because it probably is the future of if California, if it's done in the right areas to try to take what we've been, or give back what we've been taking.
Councilmember Hundley?
So since our well was very successful in this exercise, do you think that it could be used as a part of our water system in the future? And is the only changes, as I understand, would be the well itself and the capacity for how much water can pass through it? And then also, what kind of permit do you need on the other side to be able to do something with it rather than what you guys did with it this time, which was...
Yeah, so in order for the city to do this project as a kind of on a permanent basis, really all that would need to be done in terms of utilizing that existing test well. Well, first of all, the test well is on actually county property, so there'd have to be some easement discussions there, I think. And then there is it would also have to be permitted by the state as a drinking water well. And so there just have to be some changes to the wellhead. But then otherwise, I think it would be pretty much ready to go once the, any, terms of, water pricing and things like that were worked out.
This was a very comprehensive report at a late hour, but I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you. I guess one thing I was thinking about purchasing it is, so for example, the Lodge is it's the largest hotel in Sonoma, I think, and their entire operation is on a well. And so what I wouldn't want to be doing is purchasing water. I guess the question is, how far does it travel if you put even more in the ground? And then we don't want to be purchasing groundwater for people who are on a well. I don't, I should say.
Yeah, so this pilot study was really useful in terms of helping to evaluate kind of how far the water traveled and the effects on the aquifer in terms of groundwater levels. Because the aquifer that we're doing this project in is a confined aquifer and it's pressurized. The actual kind of the water molecules really don't travel very far, maybe a couple hundred feet at the most for this size of a project. And we had good monitoring. We were able to use some of the city's wells to do some additional monitoring to constrain that. The actual change in water levels, because it's pressurized, extend out further, but they're really only providing a benefit to other users. They're not providing that water out there, but they do increase the water levels in their wells, which can help with pumping. And then, just in terms of the overall how you account for the water that you're putting in. You really wouldn't want to be accounting for the actual molecules of water that you're putting in. So I think it would, as long as you're not putting water in and groundwater levels are continuing to decline, then that could be an indication that it's going somewhere else. But I think like the aquifer that the city is tapping is relatively confined in nature and would be pretty suitable for this type of project.
And is the one that we use for the pilot, that's the one that we would use, that's the only one we would use, or would we use a different one? Because we want to put in more water, but I thought you said that this was the most water we could put in.
Yeah, so for if the city were to really kind of build out a full-scale program, the recommendations from the consultant are really, it would be really helpful to have a new well constructed that's really specifically designed for aquifer storage and recovery. This test well could certainly be used. But
at this location?
Yes,
okay.
But the capacity could probably be improved by installing a new well.
And we might rebuild our well 6 that's right there to serve this need. And from the data, I understand that this water would positively influence well 8, which is behind Field of Dreams, but it's still relatively close.
Thank you. And with those questions, I will take it out to the members of the public. Does anyone on the Farmers Market Board want to comment on this item? Seeing no one, I will close public comment. Thank you for being here. And do you need us to take any action or? No. All right. I think that's that item. Thank you very much. On to item 6.3, consideration, discussion, and possible action regarding the city's contract with Valley of the Moon Certified Farmers Market for operation of the Tuesday night farmers market. City manager and special events manager.
Great.
Take it away.
So, Mayor Harrington, I'm going to just provide just history, and then Lisa Jansen, our community events manager, will provide a little more information, but we'll keep this brief so we can just answer questions. As council is well aware, we have a wildly cherished community event, our farmers market, which we have had, and it's grown dramatically in recent years. The city has a contract, and it is managed by Valley of the Moon Certified Farmers Market, a nonprofit organization that since 2011, after a request for proposal process. In 2017, there was quite a bit of conversation with the council and Valley of the Moon Certified Farmers Market, and we tried some different things. After that, there was a 2-year extension for the 2018 and 2019 market season, and the direction at that point was do the 2-year extension and then go do an RFP. At our February 4th quarterly agenda planning, 2 members of the council said that they would like to kind of put this on the agenda and review that prior direction and potentially not do the RFP. And so we're brought back kind of an update for you about the contract and then looking at what direction the council would like to do. If the council does not have interest in doing the RFP, which staff actually supports, we would look at doing an extension of the contract. That could be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. That's really one piece of council direction we like to look at. And then the other piece is to potentially look at increasing the rates in a way that still makes it palatable and workable with the Valley of the Moon Certified Farmers Market, but in order to contribute additional funding to the maintenance of the plaza. And so when we did this 2 years ago, we took the original conditions of the RFP and then added to them a little. And so Lisa has gone through and provided an update for you, and I'll let her give you a brief update.
So good evening, Mayor Harrington and City Council members. I'm not going to go through the entire supplemental report, but want to take a moment just to highlight kind of those items that need highlighting. The first one is the Valley of the Moon Certified Farmers Market organization continues to work closely with the city staff. They have met most of the policy goals and the additional conditions as the city manager outlined in the 2018 contract extension. They continue to take full responsibility for ensuring the entire plaza is left clean and tidy. This includes emptying all the trash cans, making sure the bathrooms are restocked and monitored. It also means that all the litter is being picked up, so there's no additional services being required from city staff for the weekly farmers market. They also hire a recycling and sorting vendor that ensures that all the waste generated by this event, or these events, I should say, get recycled, and the recycled materials are being pulled from the waste stream and disposed of properly. We are currently working together to ensure that the single-use plastic ban, which is going into effect, is being communicated to not only the board and getting clarity on what that means to them, but also to all the vendors. They've had some extensive meetings in recent weeks. So that ban will go into effect on May the 7th, which is the first farmers market. The city is a sponsor of this event, as reflected on the farmers market website. I think it's important to note that literally they bring the market to the city, and it's presented in conjunction with the city of Sonoma. So I think it's important that they've really hit that policy goal as far as being that good community partner. They also make sure that all of the city seals located prominently in all of the marketing materials for the market as well. I think it's important to note that the Valley of the Moon Certified Farmers Market has minimally raised the stall fees over the last couple of years. The stall fees have not increased for the farmers, but per the conditions that were noted in the extension. This, coupled with maxing out the footprint, the stall footprint for both the rear parking lot and the horseshoe, has allowed them to cover those additional expenses with hiring the sorting company, and has allowed them to get their budget back up to a more profitable position. Sorry, I'm getting tired. I don't know how you guys can do this. It's important to note that there was some reticence in 2019 to look at increasing fees again, because they weren't sure where the city's, what direction the city council was going to take as far as going out to RFP. So with that said, it is projected that they will be able to pay the increase in the fees. It went up to $250 for the weekly rental fees for 2019. It's important to note that in the 2018 contract extension, we did give a projected fee for 2020 market season, which was literally just bringing it up to market rate of what we would charge other organizers for a similar event, utilizing just the horseshoe and the rear parking lot. And just to kind of put it into perspective, when you kind of take out the stall fees, what that increase year over year, if we were to look at increasing it to make it and not subsidize it, you're kind of looking at, if you pull the farmer market stalls out, a $4 increase per stall for all the other vendors participating. So that would be a weekly increase. That's just, I'm trying to give you some perspective.
$4 to get to $500 or $4 to get to $250?
To the incremental $250 increase in the weekly rental fee.
$4 this year.
$4 next year if they were to set the fees. Sorry, I wasn't clear on that. And like I said, that is just me throwing numbers out to kind of give you a perspective of what that means. Obviously, they have to be comfortable. It's their business plan. The continued goal for both entities is to make sure that the Valley of the Moon Certified Farmers Market can continue to organize and execute a financially stable event, and ensuring that the financial programs that they've really worked hard, like the EBT programs and the sorting and the recycling, continue to move forward into the future. Staff is requesting direction at this point for a multi-year contract extension and looking for some thoughts on the fee structure. And at this point, I'd just like to thank you for your time. I'm going to keep it short. And I'm here to answer any questions. We also have Bill Darden, Emily Fitzpatrick, and Christopher Welch here from the Valley of the Moon Certified Market organization to also assist with questions.
I'm wondering, since we don't have any public here to comment, if we can just have them come up and see if you'd like to just address this on the matters. More or less briefly.
Mayor Harrington, is this on? Mayor Harrington, hello.
Hi.
And City Council and City staff. Thank you so much for taking the time to take a look at us again, and any questions that you need answered, I'll be able to do that. We are very happy as an organization to be partnering with the city of Sonoma. It has worked very well in the respect that the audience or the attendees see that we have a mutual goal with the city of Sonoma and with the organization Valley and Moon Certified Farmers Market. And we've gone as far as changing our name to the Tuesday Night Market, brought to you by Valley of the Moon Certified Farmers Market. So we're very happy about that. And things have worked very well, our recycling program. And though we have the entire plaza now, we've been able to capture it and keep it clean, organized, and the city, or Terry, of course, from the parks, he's very happy too, because his staff can go on doing things that needs to be done for the city, and then it doesn't take up his staff's time. So I'm very happy the way things have worked in the last year. So thank you very much again.
Thank you. I have a quick question. Can you just address the increased fees, your thoughts on that?
The address fees to
The proposed increased fees, do you have thoughts about that?
to the vendors? Is that
There's a proposal that that it was mentioned in 2017 that the fees for 2020 would be increased to $500 per week. Do you have thoughts about that?
I don't.
Oh, okay.
I don't.
No objection.
I don't have any objections at this time. No.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Questions?
So how much outreach have you done with vendors regarding the single-use plastic ban for utensils and those kinds of things? Is it fully on the vendors? Or are you as an organization pursuing that as kind of a whole organization? How's that going? What's the reactions to it? That's kind of what I want to know.
Well, change is never good, especially for vendors that have been used to doing what they're doing. But we've had several meetings with the vendors, 2 of them, and they are taking it as it comes along, because this is going to be good for the plaza, for the environment, for the city. And they have looked at a lot of different things that they can purchase now. And it's going to be a slow process to get them going all the way. But they are on board with everything that we've asked them to do as far as that single-use plastic is concerned.
And who's going to be monitoring whether or not they're complying with the ban?
We are. We are, absolutely. And I believe that there is also, Lisa will be doing some monitoring along with myself, and we'll be in communication with each other about what's going on.
Any other questions? No? Okay. I guess technically I will open public comment and close public comment. For those of you watching at home, the only people that are here are from the farmers market. So, Councilmember Cook.
We're on comments now, right?
Yeah. As far as I know.
Well, I just want to thank Bill Darden and the team. You guys have done a great job.
Thank you.
I know that I will be supporting to have staff, negotiate a multi-year deal, and good luck. I know that I think May 1st is when it starts.
It's May 7th.
May 7th, because
Yes.
these are long Tuesdays, aren't you?
They sure are. Yeah.
So good luck on the year, and thank you for everything. And
Thank you.
I do appreciate it, and you're a nice partner of the city.
Thank you very much.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
So I have a few thoughts on this. I would like the city to get out of the subsidization. God. So I'd like to stop subsidizing the market. I feel like with the vendors that they have, there's enough money there for them to pay the full fees. And I do think that with regard to cost of the city, I appreciate the efforts to clean up the overall plaza, and I think that that's really important. But I think that wear and tear on the parks and things like that is stuff that we as a city are recouping. It's a wonderful event. I go to it all the time. Whenever I'm in town on Tuesday and it's going on, I love to go to it. But I think you got a lot of vendors there. I'm looking at stall fees right now. I think it's $45 for a food truck for a day there. It seems like it's possible that there could be an amicable solution in which the city's not losing on money on the deal and not subsidizing the farmers market. I would like to see us get out of that in the long term. But I think that this vendors, obviously, you guys have met everything that we've asked of you previously. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the efforts that you're making on the single-use plastic. I know that that's going to be a question for a lot of the plaza events going forward. I'm just hearing from other people that are running events in the plaza that they're being charged higher rates, and why should they be charged higher rates than the farmers market? And I think that's kind of an important point, and one that we should address eventually, for sure.
Thank you. Councilmember Hundley?
Good to see you all.
Thank you.
I'm really impressed with now that we have Lisa Jansen. I feel to be like the sort of connection between government and the things that happen outside of government, and it seems to be. I really like the way that everything has been evolving and getting some of the things that we wanted to do, like with the single-use plastic, and it's still a great event. People still love showing up for it. I'm excited about it. I think I would like to do a 2-year agreement, and I know that we've mentioned sort of going back and regrouping and doing another RFP. And the only reason I think that it's still worth doing is only because it's been sort of evolving over time, and it's very different than it was sort of when all this started. So I think that we should do this either in 2 years or perhaps in 3 years. But I know this is something that we just keep pushing down the road because we keep having a lot of things to do and things are going pretty well. But so I do at some point, after 2 or 3 years, I think I would like to sort of rethink of all the details. I do think, so I've been hearing in the news some much smaller markets closing. They're not opening this summer in Occidental, I think at Tiburon, in part because people aren't showing up, which we don't have that problem, and in part because the cities no longer can afford to subsidize the market, which is the thing I worry the most about our market, because now that we sort of can feel which way the wind is blowing with the economy and things get tight with us, and the last thing I want to happen is the city is making hard choices about where we're going to spend our money and having to pay for things like our fire department and then not be able to continue what we've been doing, and then suddenly everything falls apart. So I do agree with Logan that I would like to see the market continue to grow stronger and more fiscally stable, but I would like to keep doing what we're doing, direct staff to go for 2 or 3 more years, whatever my colleagues are open to, and then I just think that it'd be a nice time to kind of regroup and just think about the way things are going and what we want the future to do and what the next sort of chapter of this wonderful thing is going to look like. But definitely want to keep going.
Okay.
So I definitely support having an extension of the contract, and I would support 3 years. And I think as things are going in this town, having a regular free event that brings community get together and welcomes everybody is so critical, and it's really the heart and soul of the town. To be able to come together once a week and do something where there is no cost is amazing, or a low cost.
No cost.
Well, I mean, hopefully people buy some things there, but
Yeah.
Optional cost. And I think when we did talk about this extensively in 2017, I heard from so many people the fear people had about us ruining it, really kind of reinforced how important having an event that's open to everybody is. And we have so many things now that you have to pay for. And so it's just, I think, over time you are evolving your business model to charge more. I agree, you can charge food trucks probably more. I think other places people get charged $150, but I understand that you're working on it. I appreciate that you'd have no objection to the increase in the fees to the $10,000. But I think a little subsidy for something that is one of the only ongoing free events for people is important. It's like a community version of a library or something. It's like, for building community. And, I've looked at what you guys do a lot over the last several years, and it is really impressive, and people love going, and I appreciate all the things you're doing. And I think adding on the plastic ban is great, and seeing people not using plastic water bottles on there anymore will be wonderful. And so, hopefully we'll just continue to work well together.
It's a great family affair.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
And Chris has something to say?
I wanted to clarify something that Councilmember Harvey said. In looking at this chart, okay, there was a misconception, and we certainly have worked to correct it, about our stall fees. That number you use, council member, is wrong. If anything, it maybe was back in 2014. I'm just not sure. You said $45, but keep in mind that in 2018, we changed our prepared food vendors to a per stall fee minimum, okay? So, for instance, a food truck can't help but take up 3 stalls. The minimum for a 10 by 10 stall is $50, so their minimum is $150, and we generally get from them, because it's a minimum of $150 or 10%, we get from them $200, $300 plus dollars. Okay, so the vendors that are potentially making the most money are paying us more, and our objective is to actually get to a point where the farmers, who are dwindling for a variety of reasons, and some of them have nothing to do with any of us, are not charged anything. Okay, because we're desperately working to keep as many farmers there as possible. I know that when you go down there, it seems like a party, and in fact it is, but let's not forget what it started to be and what we would like to, as a small town in an agricultural area, continue to encourage and foster, which is small independent farmers. So, if there are artisans there, and artisans get charged $25, and there's no percentage for anybody except the prepared food vendors. The rest have a flat fee. But artisans, we see a regular turnover. Those of you who go there often, we have some people that are there every year, but a lot of them, even $25, that when they do their business model, it doesn't work, so they won't come back in the following year. So we have to be very careful about pushing these stall fees more. Now, we've done some, and the percentage was a great idea, but we can't push that too far, or we lose the viability of the market. So I just want to make sure that was clear. And and also, just as a perspective, I always like to point this out to Lisa and Kathy and you guys. Our entire budget is $100,000. So $5,000 next year is 5% of our budget, which is not small. Okay, so we have the police now telling us that, we paid $3,000 last year, and we may be paying 8 or 10 or more this year. So there are increased fees. We're working to do those, but that's what Lisa was alluding to. We have to make it financially successful, and we really appreciate the subsidy. The other thing I wanted to address was, when you talk about subsidizing and the figure you used, I think it's a little incorrect to say that if you charged us $500, it's equitable, because as Lisa pointed out, that's we theoretically have the whole plaza, but the $500 would be full charge on the horseshoe and the rear parking area, which is much less than the whole plaza. So there's numbers in here that indicate if we were paying the full fee, what would it be, Lisa? It's like $20,000.
It's $1,900 a market times 20 markets this year.
So we like to think that we've got a partnership here, and I think, Amy, what you were talking about is accurate. We could not do it if we had to pay that, nor do I honestly think you could find a provider that would do it for that. So this event, which is cherished by the entire community, is dependent upon the city's cooperation. We can call it what we want, but we don't have any illusions that we're a different kind of event. Okay, and so to say 19,000 for us, I don't think is really right. We are there every week. There's nobody else like that. It's like there's a lot of things that make us just fundamentally different. And our board has talked about, we would love to see acknowledgement that there's a different fee structure for this kind of event, which we may be the only one. So I just wanted to get those clarifications in there, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And did you need additional direction from us?
So I think at this point, if I could just have direction to direct staff to go and negotiate multi-year contract. If council's flexible, whether it's 2 or 3, we can try to work that through. I think part of it is we really want to sit at the table and understand some of their tension points and look to how can we I think, do what we started to do 2 years ago, which was create a glide path of increasing those revenues and yet not pushing the market to a point that, that impacts their success, and yet also create some additional revenue back to the city for some of the wear and tear that we do have.
Councilmember Hundley has a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to add about the fees that I do see the distinction between a one-time event and you guys. It's kind of like a scale of efficiencies thing. My interest is like hard costs, like the things that the city is paying for. Like it's just sort of even out. So whatever like costs are, like that's it. Whereas dot costs would be different for like a one-time event because of sort of different things. So I do see the distinction between it. And so whatever that sustainable amount is, it would be based on like a different beast of a very regular event that you guys have.
Did you want a motion?
Yeah, it'd be great to have a motion.
Motion to approve extend the contract for 2 years? Where's our motion?
Just make one up. I mean, just craft one.
Make it up.
I think the motion, okay.
Motion to direct staff to continue the contract of the Valley of the Moon Certified Farmers Market for operation on Tuesday night farmers market for what? 3 years?
For 3 years.
For 3 years?
I agree, 3. Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Mayor Harrington?
Aye. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
See you soon.
See you soon. See you out there. Thank you.
Looking forward to it. On to item 6.4, an update on the fiscal year 2018-19 budget to actuals and discussion, consideration, and possible action on mid-year budget adjustments to the City of Sonoma's operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 18-19.
And Mayor Harrington, members of the council, Sue Casey, our Assistant City Manager, Administrative Services Director, will be making this presentation, and then Colleen Ferguson, our Public Works Director, will be assisting.
Good evening, Mayor Harrington and council members. As Kathy said, we're giving an update on the fiscal year 18-19 budget to actuals and asking council to discuss and take possible action on the proposed mid-year budget adjustments to the 18-19 operating and capital budgets. The final budgets for fiscal year 18-19 were adopted on June 25th, 2018. So when the original budget is adopted in June for the upcoming year, revenue and expense forecast projections are based on what is known at the time, estimations based on prior average revenue and expense growth, forecasts from experts in the revenue or expense source, and then economic indicators. So to ensure revenue and expenses are accounted for properly, it is often necessary to amend the original approved annual budget. So first I'll just review the major general fund revenues year to date, and then the major mid-year adjustments. So overall, the city is seeing an increase in revenues due to continued growth in property taxes and the new increase in transient occupancy taxes. These revenue increases will help offset most of the forecasted increases in expenditures for fiscal year 18-19. The fiscal year adopted budget projected $19,521,611 in revenues for the general fund. Staff is recommending an adjustment of $311,000 or 1.59% increase in projected general fund revenues. The adjustments are detailed in attachment A to the resolution. With this adjustment, the revised general fund budget will show $19,832,621 in revenues. And based on the recommended revised budget through March 2019, the city has collected 59.92% of the projected revenues. This is primarily due to when property taxes come in. Property tax payments are received from the county in December and April, with a cleanup payment in June. So with payments received just through December 2018, property taxes trending slightly above the 50% level at 55.6%. No adjustments to this revenue source are going to be made at this time because the payments are not evenly distributed between December and April, And then there's always some late year corrections to assessments that occasionally affect the final property tax distributions. But staff is still anticipating that property tax will come in slightly higher than originally budgeted. Another major revenue source is sales tax, and that has been received through January 2019, and that's also trending somewhat higher than the expected 58% level at 7 months. But in late 2017, the state switched to a new accounting system. It's kind of been in the news lately. And they're still struggling to post all sales tax payments from the prior year, as well as some amendments to misapplied sales taxes. The state has promised this will be brought current by the end of this fiscal year, so no adjustments will be made at this time until all the payments and corrections are settled. Transient occupancy tax, another major revenue source, was increased by 2% with a voter measure beginning January 1st, 2019. And we projected $375,972 for a half a year increase in this tax, but we're reducing that by the projected actuals. There's some flattening in receipts this year, as well as the renovations to MacArthur Place have also decreased this revenue. So we're only increasing the TOT revenue by $185,691. Fire ambulance billing revenue is going to be reduced by an accounting entry of $200,000 for estimated annual bad debt and Medi-Cal insurance write-offs. However, this revenue loss will be offset by approximately $175,000 in IGT state reimbursements for Medi-Cal write-offs. So through March 2019, fees are at fees. That's the last major revenue source I'll talk about. Fees are at 38% of projected revenue. But there's several reasons. Planning cost recovery fees were approved by the City Council in December and became effective February 15th. This effective date was slightly later than the staff's projected start date of January. And processes for cost recovery are currently being developed, and these fees will be billed once the new systems are in place. And we expect to have all the bills done by fiscal year end. But there will be some adjustment for fee revenue at year end because of the 1 month delay in the projected fee recovery and then the overall number of development projects. All the other revenue adjustments are outlined in the attachment to the resolution, and I won't go into detail for those. So next I'll move on to general fund operating expenses, and the adopted general fund operating expenses for 2018-19 were projected to be $19,362,896, and staff is recommending an increase of $395,872, or a 2.4% increase. This results in a revised budget of $19,758,768 for expenditures, and reduces the projected excess of revenues over expenses from $158,000 to $78,000 for year end. And these expense adjustments are also detailed in attachment A to the resolution. But based on the recommended revised budget through March 2019, the city has expended 66.3% of the projected expenditures. So as mentioned previously, when the budget was adopted, several appropriations were just based on estimates, so we're making some corrections to those estimates. The majority of the costs are for legal bills, which are related to various development projects, cell tower processing, and other city initiatives. Just a few other general fund expense updates that need mentioning are to the city's police and fire budgets or contracts. The city's contract with Valley of the Moon Fire District is increasing by $109,698. And this is due to the completion of both line and management staff labor contracts or agreements, as well as increases in medical insurance premiums that were unknown at the time the budget was approved in June. The labor agreements provided modest cost of living increases, a 2% COLA, an increase in medical insurance premiums in each of the 2 years covered by the labor contracts. But however, based on additional funding reimbursements from fire strike teams and overall budget management, these increases will be absorbed this year without any additional funding from us. And then similar to the fire budget, the Sheriff's Department was in labor negotiations at the time the budget was approved last year. And their negotiated agreement included a one-time pensionable lump sum payment to all employees equal to a 2% salary increase, 8 weeks of paid parental leave requiring increased backfill, and 2 new holidays that also increased backfill. The police department is forecasting an increase in salary and benefits of $55,000 for fiscal year 18-19, but fortunately the city will be able to absorb this increase through some other identified savings in salary and benefits. So there will be no increase to their contract as well. So just finally a quick overview of the other funds requested mid-year budget adjustments. And they're detailed in attachment B to the resolution. It shows a total increase of $209,528 of this increase is for funding of EMS supplies and equipment for SVFRA. And the funding will come from the IGT Medical Reimbursement Fund, and the funds are from this which are direct related to EMS billings have been placed in a separate fund for accounting purposes. At the end of fiscal year 17-18, the fund had a balance of $530,303. So there's plenty of funds there to fund these this request, and then the remaining $11,787 of other fund budget adjustments are for property liability and workers' compensation insurance increases. So now Colleen Ferguson, our Public Works Director, will discuss the changes in the CIP budget.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, back. Hang in there. We're almost done.
There's nothing I would rather be doing right now.
I love it.
Take your time.
Mayor Harrington, council members. So we're just talking about the capital improvement program budget and mid-year budget adjustments that are recommended. A lot of them have to do with the Measure M maintenance of effort. So let me just describe that a little bit. On November 2nd, 2004, the voters of Sonoma County passed Measure M that you've heard of, a quarter-cent sales tax to address transportation needs throughout the county. The Measure M implementation guidelines included a provision that local jurisdictions maintain their existing commitment of local funds for transportation purposes, and that's what we call the Measure M maintenance of effort. The maintenance of effort is based on general fund expenditures and a percentage of general fund expenditures. For City of Sonoma, it's 6.33%. So when we have good years and are increasing our general fund expenditures in order to meet our maintenance of effort commitment under Measure M, we also need to increase our transportation expenditures. So when we did the math based on the current projection of general fund expenditures for this fiscal year, we concluded that we should increase the funding for transportation projects in the CIP and do that by taking funding from projects that really aren't moving forward this year and fund transportation projects that are moving forward, and then get credit for those expenditures and increase of meeting our maintenance of effort this year. We did not meet it last fiscal year. So there's an attachment that shows the details along this line. Another recommended mid-year budget adjustment in the CIP is for the Senate Bill 1, or the Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Act. Turns out we're going to receive more money than we put in the budget originally, so we'd like to have that included in the mid-year budget adjustments. It's $9,588 on top of the $183,868 that was in the budget. So that's the brief summary of the proposed mid-year budget adjustments to the CIP, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about those details.
And maybe just one other item, an area of interest to council has historically been our community fund program, which is where we fund our recreation programs. And you heard 2 presentations tonight from folks about that mid-year. So this last year, we had funding set aside for the 4 key recreation providers. In addition, we paid Sonoma overnight support. We took $20,000 from reserve and put it in and used this funding. And then, but there was about $20,000 that was discretionary funds that we had set where people could come in and ask for something. It was an ability to let council kind of be able to respond to requests mid-year. We are at April and we've had no use of that funding, so that basically $20,000, about $21,000 sits there. This next year, I think when we look at the community fund program, we'll talk more about this in budget, but that might be we may want to at some point revisit kind of the discretionary and the structure of that, and how do you want to do that going forward. So I wanted just to lay that out as well.
I have a comment about that. So I met with Supervisor Gorin with the city manager to find out if there might be some additional money from the county for recreation this summer. And it's possible that there are matching funds for our funds. So we could make it, if we put our $20,000 in, perhaps it's not unlikely that we could get $20,000 from the county, which would give us $40,000 to spend on recreation. I personally would like to target middle school kids and high school kids, just like everybody was talking about tonight. It was so apropos of this evening, but I would love to have that. And I did speak to John Gurney at the community center, and they thought that they could put together a leadership program for kids, which kind of goes with our youth engagement type kids, and they could do a public speaking and all kinds of stuff over there, and a writing and an art component. So they're on board with putting together a specialized program if we have any funding. There's also tennis clinics that we could run, and we could also partner with the Boys and Girls Club to do additional scholarships so the kids could enjoy the specialty program. So in terms of outreach, I have talked to a number of those providers. It sounds like we can get county money in addition to our own money, and it would be a one-time thing, but it's something we could do really nicely for the kids of this valley this summer, if you like.
I'm very interested in that. I think that would be a great use of the funds to provide for that. Obviously, there's 1,000 ways we could use money that would be very beneficial. I'm sure SOS could use some of that funding. I'm sure that the Vintage House could as well. But if we can get matching funds, I think that's a really good reason. So if we've got recreation, we can get matching funds for that. That's a compelling reason because then we can do even more. So I'd be interested in that. It's the first I'm hearing of it, but that would be pretty cool. And where that money goes can be another discussion, but community center, Boys and Girls Club makes sense. Senior recreation as well. All those would be interesting pathways for sure.
The only thing the city's concerned about, which is legitimate, is like we can't run the programs. So we want to use our partners that we already have and have them.
And we got to make that decision tonight as far as where we're going to send it? Okay.
No.
Okay.
Councilmember Cook?
And I also agree with Mayor Harrington. I think that'd be very important, and I do like the target of summer camps with, the children of the valley. I mean, and that would be my biggest question, was to make sure that it was open to the valley, not just the city, even though it's city funds, but all that funds, a lot of it comes from the sales tax and different stuff from the valley. So I would be supporting that also.
And that was when we talked to Supervisor Gorin. That's one of the things she said, is that if it's county money, it can't just only come to the city. We have to take care of the kids in the valley too. So,
yeah, I think that with the summer program that we got described from Boys and Girls Club is a great opportunity. I mean, it kind of makes me sad that there's kids that are at the Boys and Girls Club they're at the Boys and Girls Club and they can't participate in the activities that are going on just because they're underprivileged. I think if we can bump those numbers up a little bit, that would be awesome.
I agree. Great. And I have a question. Does anyone else have any questions? I guess my question is about how the budget works. So if we appropriate money, but then more money is spent than we appropriated, what if we didn't approve that? I'm not suggesting that. I'm just curious. So what if we don't approve that later? Or can you only spend the money that's appropriated?
Well, a budget is a plan, right? So there's things that unintended consequences, things that are coming in. So, we try to keep council aware of what those items are. So, and then there's always this mid-year budget adjustment. And if you said no, or if you said, all right, I understand I have to spend this because these costs are going up, but I want you to go and figure out what to cut. You could give us that direction. So, that's, we're sitting in a place this year where we're able to absorb a lot of things because we're continuing to kind of monitor and manage the budget well. There's also, we've got some additional revenue to deal with some unexpected kind of one-time both transitional costs and issues that we faced with this year. So that's kind of the way the process works.
Because I was thinking, since we're not in charge of negotiating the police and fire contracts, let's say they agreed to 5% increases for their workers, and it's already 50% of our budget. So let's say we did not want, that was not what we would want to agree to for ourselves. That was actually my thought.
So I think the contracts are a little tougher nut because I think really we have limited options in terms of ways to contract for those services. So if you look historically, and I know council's seen some of this information, both those agencies have been frankly very judicious in those cost of living increases. And so, if we saw a place that if there was a pattern of very large increases, then I think it would raise questions and we would be having longer term conversations of, is this an agency we can afford to contract with, or should we go ask Petaluma or Napa County or somewhere else to contract? This next year, I think as we're looking at budget, I think there's kind of a balancing act where I think we should be putting in, because both these agents, fire is not this next year, but sheriff, it was a 1-year deal. So we will be, I think as we're looking at budget, I don't want to be caught flat-footed, so I'm asking them, we've put in kind of a base inflator, so it will be in the budget, especially since the new budget will include what was, some of those, there were some of the leave time that will continue forward, and we need to be able to capture that. So it's a balancing act where we definitely don't want to over budget, but I don't want to have to come back to you mid-year and ask for additional funding if we can try to, again, a budget being a plan, anticipate and then put some additional funding in the budget to cover that where we think it is reasonable.
Thanks. Any other questions? City Attorney, if there's no one here, do I have to open public comment? Oh, okay. I will open public comment. I will close public comment. Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Cook.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution, the City Council of the City of Sonoma to amend fiscal year 2018-19 budget resolution number 41-218 to accomplish fiscal year 2018-19 mid-year budget amendments.
Can I offer a suggestion that we include the $20,000 additionally in the $20,000 to recreation?
And I'd like,
Just a suggestion.
I'll go ahead and add the 20,000 extra to go into children, I guess school age activities with a matched grant from Sonoma County.
Sure.
I mean, I would love to talk about this. I just feel like there's not a lot of information to go on. I'd like to know exactly sort of what's on the table from the county and where, think about more of these kind of programs we could do. So I am interested in talking about it. It's not something that I'm interested in sort of making a sudden switch tonight without having a deeper conversation about it.
Okay, I'll second the motion. Can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley?
No.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 3-1-0-1.
Thank you. On to item 6.5. The latest and the greatest. Discussion and direction on quarterly city council agenda planning for April-June 2019, including a discussion of new agenda items. Recommendation, provide feedback.
Great, council. as you're well aware, this is our quarterly agenda process. What's sitting in front of you is a estimated plan of when some of the major items that we're working on are coming forward. As council is also well aware, we are knee-deep in budget mode in negotiations, so this is a really busy time of the year for staff, and we have a number of major initiatives that are being driven at the same time. So we're sitting here tonight. Our next kind of public meeting will be the Housing Town Hall. It'll be a public workshop, but will be an official council meeting as well, but focus on the workshop. April 29th, we'll be having just a closed session on labor negotiations, and then we enter the month of May. May 6th, we'll be coming back with a report from the subcommittee, Mayor Harrington and Vice Mayor Harvey, to talk about minimum wage. Bert Whitaker from County Parks is also just going to do a presentation about everything the Parks is doing in the Valley and some interesting updates there. We'll have another Housing Town Hall on May 6th. And then staff is looking at doing either May 7th or May 8th. We're still trying to figure out the details. Basically an early preview of the budget. This won't be all the numbers. It'll be kind of some of the concepts we're working on with a 5-year forecast and hopefully some updates from police and fire. This is something we would like to do, and we're going to try hard to have a piece of this presentation for you. May 20th is we're looking at presentation by Supervisor Gore, Memorial Bench, and maybe looking at the cheese factory appeals coming back here, but that really is a staffing question that the city attorney and I will still be working through. And then we have 3 regular meetings now in June. June 3rd will be Cannabis. So we'll be bringing back the 2 ordinances and the resolutions. We're looking at the Housing Trust Fund and working with Vice Mayor Harvey and Councilmember Hundley on both the trust fund itself and the 1% TOT. And we will also be bringing a report back on the housing impact fees and get direction. We'll also hold a budget hearing early in June at a date that's not quite listed here yet. We're still trying to corral everyone's calendars. June 10th will be first reading for the minimum wage reading. Sonoma garbage franchise, this is an item where typically if their costs can be under 6%, then that contract can be done administratively. The issue they're facing is their base costs will be just under $60,000, but they have lost, as of April 1, there's no longer any recycling money provided. They can still recycle and everything will still be recycled, but they're not being paid for the product anymore, which is about a $30,000 decrease. So we're talking with them about that issue and what that means. Looking at an emergency preparedness update June 10th, and then June 17th would be looking at a housing report with impact fees and budget adoption, and then June 20th, a housing town hall. So the 2 items still to be scheduled in here and are the cheese factory appeals, and then we've got this general plan UGB conversation. And because a lot of the, Mr. Storer and the city attorney's office will be intimately involved in both cannabis and the cheese factory, and then also general plan. It may be that general plan UGB, I'm not sure that we can get that done this quarter. I think we could set a date July and make sure that we're going to get it done by the end of July. And then the only other item is we had one request from a council member that wanted to talk about and have staff bring something back to talk about the official record of the city, whether that should be the minutes or whether that should be the video. And so that is an item for you to talk about. That was the only item that was sent to staff ahead of the meeting. So with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, I'll take it out. Oh, do you have a question? I'll take it out to the public. There's no public. I'll close the public comment. Councilmember Cook.
I guess it's not really a question, but I would like to comment. I like what one council member was talking about as far as the video, the official record. Where would that fit into this matrix?
We haven't talked. We believe this is something that could come back in this quarter. We have not picked a specific date yet. So, if there's a majority of council that wants to have that conversation and give us that direction, that's something that could come back.
I would like to have that conversation.
So I would just say it was me, but I got it from watching the planning commission, and they brought it up, and they were saying that they wanted to have the minutes, the record include the video and also the written minutes, and then I guess Veronica Nebb said that we would have to change our policy officially to include the record. So I was hoping we could do that. It was from the planning commission. It was actually their suggestion.
Yeah, I would accept that.
Great.
So if there's is there majority support for council for us to add that this quarter? Okay, so
Do you think, I mean, is that going to be an onerous thing? Okay, cool.
No.
Then I'm okay with that. Yeah, it should be easy.
So I think just what we would bring is, kind of a staff report with pros and cons, and then bring you a resolution that would give you the option of moving whichever way you want to, so that you have that in front of you and can take action.
And then the only other, I spoke to Councilmember Agrimonti tonight, and she mentioned the cemeteries to me. And I don't know that needs to be a regular council agenda item, but we should probably schedule a subcommittee meeting to, look at it at least. And, I think that doesn't require this, but definitely I just wanted, since she mentioned it, and I thought it should be brought up that it is not forgotten.
It's not forgotten, and we do have someone who's willing to do some volunteer work, but this really is something that our finance staff needs to provide some background information before we do too much work, and there's just not capacity between now and June. So this is one of the pieces that I see that we can, pick up and look at in the following quarter. The other thing you just reminded me, though, Mayor Harrington, there was the question that Vintage House talked about a senior survey presentation, and there seemed to be interest from the council, and so that's probably something else that we would want to just try to figure out if we could do a presentation if there's interest there.
Yeah. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Council member reports or comments? Seeing none, city manager comments and announcements.
Just 3 quick ones. One, some members of the council that are watching, members of the community, we have had some technical glitches with our iCompass, which is our video streaming and archiving software. We ordered a brand new piece of equipment. I want to thank our city clerk for working with the vendor and technology team. That was installed, and it's been working beautifully tonight. This is the first kind of full test drive. So hopefully that issue has been resolved. Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to add that all of the videos, even if they're glitchy, are available on YouTube. I don't know if you're
correct. Yeah. And go ahead.
And to that, we also, if there is a glitch, they are actually removed and the correct video is uploaded because SVTV, Sonoma Community, Bob's team, communications, they actually, it's a very redundant system. He captures it separately, we capture it, there's an audio. So if the video is not properly put up or if it's not full, then we do immediately replace it with the one that Bob has.
I do, just as a council member comment, I just wanted to take an opportunity to thank staff. I know it's been a lot of long hours and a lot of work in the last few months, and I just wanted to appreciate everything that you guys have been doing for us and for the city, and just to acknowledge that. And I just really, really appreciate it, and thank you for everything you guys do.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Harvey. 2 other quick things. Housing Town Hall. So go to our website. April 25th is the first session of Vintage House. There's also a survey we're asking folks to fill out. So spread the word. We would love some younger families and kind of that 20 to 40 demographic to participate. So anyone who can help spread the word with that would be great. And also our next quarterly newsletter, About Town newsletter, will be coming out this week. And if anyone isn't on that distribution list and would like to be, they can just email us at citysonoma.org and we'll add you up.
Can we get flyers for the Housing Town Hall so I can hand them out?
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
we have flyers. If you'd like, anyone would like flyers, we can.
I'll come by and
definitely-
get some, and I'll just bring them to the tasting rooms and things like that. 'Cause
That'd be
there's a lot
great.
of workers there. That'd be awesome to get in touch with. Sweet.
City Attorney, delight us with your wisdom.
Jeff Walton.
Sing that every time from now on, please.
Over the last couple of years, I've mentioned that I've been involved in a lawsuit involving the city of Novato concerning the Brown Act, and it was ultimately appealed. The trial court ruled in favor of the city of Novato, and last week the Court of Appeal affirmed the trial court's ruling and ruled in favor of the city of Novato. I just want to
Congratulations, Jeff. All right.
You
knock him dead.
I just want to let you know that I'm
That's
a
it. That's
baller.
the whole
I just-
report.
That's the report. Thank you. Just want you to know I'm a baller and just crush
No,
the
no, no.
lawsuit recently.
There are messages, lessons to be learned from this case, and I just want to mention a couple of them. One
First
is,
of all, I'm great.
I do this every other week. I only mention this one tonight. It deals with council spending time trying to agendize something for a future meeting, and that discussion that they had not being on that agenda, which actually the Brown Act allows to take place. But in this particular case, there was two projects that had been previously approved. One of the council members who did not approve those projects, who was in the minority, was trying to convince the council to put the projects on a future agenda to sort of reconsider them. And one of the projects was a solar panel project that had been built right across the street from some neighbors who were very unhappy with it. And one of those neighbors was at the council meeting trying to convince the council to put it on a future agenda to basically undo it. And when it did not do that, she then formed a group called Transparent Gov Novato and sued the city for violating the Brown Act, for having the discussion. She wanted the discussion to take place, but she wanted them to decide to put it on a future agenda. So when the council didn't do that, she then sued the city of Novato for violating the Brown Act. And the Court of Appeal ruled that because before the lawsuit was filed, the city council adopted a new policy on how to agendize an item for a future meeting, that there was no longer a judiciable dispute that was worthy of consideration. And so the court never really addressed the question of whether or not the council engaged in, and when it was engaging in these discussions, was violating the Brown Act. It just simply said because the council took action to cure the problem and create a system and a policy, there was no longer any need for judicial intervention. The other thing that happened was that the council during that same meeting formed a subcommittee to talk about the solar panel project to see if there's a way to unwind it. There really wasn't. It was almost completed. And the formation of that committee was not also on the agenda that night. And so this group claimed that that violated the Brown Act. But the council committed to never doing that again. And that also is provided in the Brown Act. The Brown Act gives councils and planning commissions the right to respond to claims of violating the Brown Act by saying, well, we won't do that again. And that cannot be used as evidence that they violated the Brown Act. So the Court of Appeal said that was fine, that relieved the council from any claims of violating the Brown Act for forming that committee, and there was no longer any dispute as to the council's discussion that night to put a matter on a future agenda. So we saved the council and the city some lawyers' fees, because in the Brown Act, the prevailing party is entitled, if it's the plaintiff who's the prevailing party, is entitled to lawyers' fees to be paid by the city. So that was a nice result.
Great job, Jeff.
Yeah.
And I will just add that,
I mean, Mr. Walter. I apologize.
on the bottom of our standard agenda every time is appointments to the committees, which gives the council ability to establish and make appointments to a council's committee with respect to any item on the agenda. So we've put that on. This has been on for, I don't know, maybe a year or so.
As a result of this.
As a result of the lawsuit, we said, all right, how do we make sure our council doesn't get caught in that bind? So it's basically noticed as a standard part of your notes for every meeting.
Nothing further. Meeting adjourned. Hooray!